Welcome to Ink versus Algorithm, the Writer's Pod. And I'm thrilled to have within the pod Mr. Ali Rizvi. Welcome, Ali.
Thank you for having me, Spitz. Yeah, been a while. Well, sort of, not really, but
Ali is a writer, and we are going to talk about the 10-year anniversary of the launch of his seminal book, The Atheist Muslim. Ali and I were also colleagues at a Toronto healthcare digital marketing and communications company where I came to get to know Ali, and we can go into some of that backstory. And just last night, you were invited to a celebration of your book. How did that go? Give us a little view into the accolades, into this pomp and circumstance of this event that they threw in your honor and in the honor of a book which has maintained its relevance, perhaps even more so through all the changes.
That's the thing with books. Like both of us are musicians. We started playing music. One of the things with music is that it, doesn't really last a long time. Once a song gets old, it gets old. But with books, it's weird. It's over time. You keep on getting it kind of stays. In the attention in the minds of people. So it was interesting. It was called Religion, Reason, and the Modern Muslim Mind 10 years on. So it hasn't been exactly 10 years since the book came out, but it's been almost 10 years. And it was really interesting for me. I really enjoyed putting it together just because of the way that things have changed. Our culture has changed, politics has changed. The movement that was in full swing at that time with, the atheist movement, the ex-Muslim movement that was coming up, secularization in the Muslim world. A lot of that has been polarized. 2015, Trump wasn't president yet. He actually became president just a few weeks before my book came out, which was a whole other conversation. It just got at that time. There were a lot of reviews. The book was blurbed by Richard Dawkins, by Sam Harris, Steven Pinker. I was looking at the list of people, Jerry Coyne, and then there were a couple of people in there that have lost touch with. And, one of them was Dave Rubin. He blurbed the book, and he's in a completely different, on a completely different planet now, just in terms of, where we used to be when we used to speak. Same thing with Majid Nawaz, kind of fell off the face of the earth. I don't know where he is right now, mentally or physically. Right. So it was.
I remember Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
That's right.
Gave you a great write-up. Wasn't that in the New York Times?
It was in the New York Times. Yeah, it was in the New York Times.
There was an article on your book in the New York Times by none other than Kareem
Abdul-Jabbar. Yeah, so he's a very famous Muslim convert from a long time ago, and he gave it a surprisingly good review. I was very like that. That was pretty. I think the book came out in November, and his review was published in January. It was the official sort of like New York Times book review
of 2015. Is that
2017 is when his review was
2017.
published. Yeah, 2016 is when the book came out. End of 2016. So yeah, we're sitting at pretty much exactly 9 years ago. This month is when the book came out, and it was. It's just a lot has happened since then. It's been quite a decade.
Let's give listeners some context, especially those unfamiliar with the Atheist Muslim, unfamiliar with your social media presence, which has been significant, and unfamiliar with what we would call in general strokes the secular humanist movement online post 9/11. So a critical milestone is to discuss the attack of September 11th, 2001, which changed the world. Prior to that, we were coming off the Clinton years, arguably the apex of American power and stability and influence. It seemed the post-World War II structure that the Allies, principally NATO and the United States, had created was more or less successful, at least according to the establishment. And that all came crashing down when the Twin Towers in New York came crashing down, when a flight hit the Pentagon, another one crashed in a Pennsylvania field. And this idea of Islamist terror literally hit home. And this was post-Iraq War, as we know, the initial one.
The initial, right? The first
initial one. So the first one with George Bush Sr. was short-lived and limited. But in the wake of that, every action has a reaction. And the Islamist world was simmering. There were signs that we should be more alert, but we did not heed them. We were caught literally off guard. And then the reaction to that reaction was significant. Dick Cheney died just last week, and he was arguably the architect of our response, some would say overreaction, to the events of 9/11. Now, the reason that I paint this history is because it provides a runway to the atheist Muslim. And I'll pass the mic back to you in terms of that background. But I think it's important for listeners to understand that 9 years ago, a decade ago, the atmosphere was quite different. You had a lot of Islamophobia as a result of these attacks. You had an evaluation and reevaluation of America's role, both in terms of foreign policy and most significantly domestically, how we viewed Muslims. And from your vantage point as a Muslim, there was a feeling that the community itself had imploded, especially on the left, regarding some of its own view of itself, of the world. And we can talk about that. But the atmosphere, as you say, was very, very different than our post and Trump redux reality. So with that, why did you write this book titled The Atheist Muslim, which is a wonderful oxymoron, at least based on how most people see Muslims? What was your intent? And do you think you accomplished what you set out to do at that time?
That's those are two great questions. First of all, why did I write the book? The title of the book is an oxymoron, but it's an oxymoron in the sense of Back to the Future, right? This idea, the context of the book is that there are millions and millions of atheists, agnostics, secular-minded people across the Muslim world. And I grew up in 3 Muslim countries, one in North Africa, in Libya. About 6 or 7 years I lived there. Grew up primarily in Saudi Arabia until I was 18, 17, 18. And then after that in Pakistan, right? And that's my country of origin where I was born. And I grew up there. And I came to the North America, pretty much Canada and the United States, where I lived in both places, when I was 24. That's the first time I actually moved here. I'd visited before a couple of times, but that's when I actually moved here. And that was in 1999, at the turn of the century, as the kids say, right? Like it was, that's when I moved here in the past century, 1999. And it took 2 years later, 9/11 happened. In 99, like I was very aware of Al-Qaeda, was very aware of the Islamic threat. We'd been living with it in Pakistan for the longest time. There's politics, there's religious strife, there's sectarianism, Shia, Sunnis. Everybody had their fundamentalists. This is just a lot of things going on. And it was, as as a secular minded person living in that environment, you just kind of observed everything. So when the 9/11 attacks happened, the moment I heard the news and they were saying, "Oh, could this be an accident?" The plane just got. I knew what it was. I knew it was Al Qaeda. I knew it was Osama bin Laden. It was pretty clear to me, and I think a lot of people who had been from that part of the world. What happened after that was the discourse, and in the United States, in a very kind of characteristically imbecilic way, it just went tribal. Like everything is, this is the way that politics is nowadays, across the Western world, across the East, everywhere, is that, if I know your position on abortion, I can predict your position on nuclear energy. Those things have nothing to do with each other, but there's just a tribal kind of arrangement of issues that everybody aligns to without really a whole lot of deliberate thought. And the same kind of thing happened, I think, after 9/11, is that I felt really that I was at this I guess there was a fork in the road, right? Like there was the left, there was the people on the left who felt that, well, Muslims are a minority, we must protect minority, and therefore we must defend everything and justify everything that's in Islamic doctrine, because that is their faith. We have to respect it, right? Pat Robertson says, okay, we got to get rid of all the gay people, then we're going to have this outrage on the left. But if an imam says it in a mosque, then, we got to respect their culture, right? So it was a bizarre kind of thing that, you want to protect the people, so you must justify the ideology. On the other hand, the right, the conservatives, they had this idea that, well, Islam, the doctrine, is incompatible with Western values. So Muslims are incompatible with Western values. So we have to profile them. We have to deport them. We have to surveil them. And later, around the time that my book came out and Trump was running for president, we have to ban them. We got to ban and have a Muslim ban. I mean, that was the original thing. Later, it got diluted, and they tried to backpedal in whatever way they could. But that was the initial plan. So I got caught between this, and I really wanted to drive home this idea of the difference between Islam as an ideology and Muslims as people, right? Ideas have rights. Ideas don't have rights. They're not entitled to respect. People do have rights, and they are entitled to respect. We don't have to respect their beliefs, but we have to respect their right to have those beliefs. So this was the idea. I'm in a family of Muslims. I was raised there. Everybody I grew up with, all my cousins, friends, loved ones, they're all Muslims. And I did not agree with them on their beliefs, but I didn't agree with them on, who do you agree with completely on their political beliefs, religious beliefs? I didn't, but I did not, that's not all they were, right? There were a lot more than what we believe. So I wanted to write this book partly because of that. I wanted to make that distinction between ideas and human beings, and how criticizing ideas, challenging ideas, even blaspheming against ideas is what moves societies forward, and demonizing people, human beings, is what rips societies apart. And that distinction is key, and I think both sides of the aisle were not making that distinction. And I think I forgot the second part of your question, what it was. You remember?
Do you think you succeeded?
Yeah. So my goal, so this is the important part. My goal, and I said this last night at the talk too, my goal was not to convert anybody. It was not to, try to turn everybody into an atheist, or really go, wag a finger at religious people or Muslim people. It was just to provide another perspective, number one. Number two, allow the conversation to happen. These are two things that were not really, they're both kind of taboo in the Muslim world. When I grew up, I knew you could be a liberal, moderate Muslim, or you could be a conservative Muslim, but you had to be Muslim. The idea of not being a Muslim was just, you didn't even speak about it. If you even mentioned it as an option in the countries I was raised in, at least, or I grew up in, that was a death sentence, literally a death sentence. It was punishable by death, apostasy. So I wanted to provide a third alternative, right? And that was that, yes, you can. You can be, you can have the community without the ideology. You can, and my idea was like culturally, just like a lot of Jewish people, I celebrate I celebrate Eid. I go and I do the Ramadan feasts without really the fasting necessarily. But I enjoy all of these things, all of the stuff that I grew up with, all the associations I have, but without the burden of the ideology. And I wanted to drive that point home that is something that's possible. And I did make an accidental discovery, and I talked about this last night. We can get into that. That was actually quite a surprise. I was very happy about it. But that was generally, that's a little teaser for what's to come. But I think that was the idea. It's just to start up a conversation. And honestly, I think that we've succeeded. Not me alone, but I think all of us who were talking about this, especially people from in my part of the world where I grew up, we did achieve that. There was a time when I remember when I first saw the Danish cartoons of Muhammad, I was absolutely shocked. I was like, wow, someone actually did this. Now, pretty much every day, I think there's at least 4 or 5 people on Twitter who tell me that, like, go and go back to Afghanistan and fuck your goats, things like that. So it's completely normalized. Not only is criticism of Islam mainstream now, it's also weaponized, and it's gone in the other direction, which I think is better than not being able to do it at all, talk about it at all.
Well, we've definitely had a whiplash effect to the regressive left, as it was called, where the liberals overshot the mark, it's fair to say, in terms of coming to the defense of Muslim people to counteract Islamophobia, while in the mirroring effect that you described, the right went hell's bells with Islamophobia, ban them, cut them off, exile them, bomb them. So the atmosphere that you describe while you were writing this book was one of deep, deep polarization.
Right.
And if I'm hearing you correctly, and I agree with you, a combination of factors hasn't necessarily mitigated either extreme point of view, but the zeitgeist on X and the gestalt of our social media currency, if it's a barometer at all, seem to suggest that we've kind of gotten past that. We're in a meta phase of Islamophobia on the one side and this liberal tendency to basically excuse all of the extremes, the religious extremes, through this lens of tolerance.
Yeah. And a lot of these things I have, I've kind of, with time and with age, I have begun to adopt sort of the George Carlin approach, where he said this about people born in America. It's like when you're born in America, you get a free ticket to the freak show. And if you are, he said, if you're born in the world, if you're just born and you exist, you have a free ticket to the freak show. And if you're born in the US, you have a front row seat, right? Like that's what I'm paraphrasing, but kind of what he said. And a lot of this is just very interesting to watch. And I don't emotionally react to it that much anymore. I am somehow at peace with it. I think it's interesting that everybody is speaking. I called, like, when I think about 2016 when the book came out, I think of that as the age of taboo, where the conversation was ruled by fear, right? It was a year before that Charlie Hebdo had happened and cartoonists had been killed, like massacred for drawing cartoons. Salman Rushdie had that fatwa. ISIS was all the rage. They were cool. We seem to have dropped off and become uncool recently. Like, I haven't heard about them for a while. So that was a big thing. The conversation was really one of taboo of fear, blasphemy. The blasphemy cases were all over the place. You could see it. And then 2025, I really think of as the age of noise, which can be annoying because, if you amplify everything, you hear nothing, right? You hear nothing. Like there's nothing, everybody's trying to be out shock jock the next person. And it's a lot of it is just shock without substance. And it doesn't really matter. You're like, oh, okay, what is going to be the tweeted manufactured outrage of today? Right. And then you look at it and you're like, oh, okay, turn off your phone and you go hang out with your kid. I mean, that's the way that life is now. It's just a lot of noise. And I think that it is, how do I explain this? I think it's just, there's a lot of critique without context, right? There's a lot of, people do the critique. It's not really intelligent critique. It's just critique. There's not a whole lot of context, and a lot of it's just noise. And noise, the good thing about noise is it's easier to drown out. So I do think that things, this is a very weird take on this. I think things are strangely a little bit better, as in I had to get security at my house in 2016. I had to check in with law enforcement every 6 months. They would regularly check up on us because, we'd gotten death threats and things like that. I had a friend, Avijit Roy, who was hacked to death in Bangladesh for being at a book festival where he wrote a book. And I had a friend, Raif Badawi, in Saudi Arabia, who was in prison, who's now out, but still not allowed to leave the country. And his kids have basically grown up without him here in Canada. So there was a lot of that then. Now, I don't have to look over my shoulder as much, right? But there's just a lot of noise.
But I think that's totally on point. We have evolved or devolved into this attention-centric culture.
Right.
Largely thanks to the success of the Donald, who has proven time and time again that you don't need to be right. You don't need to be smart. You don't even need to really be coherent. You just need to get into everyone's face.
Flood the zone.
Flood the zone. And if you flood the zone, then it's mission accomplished. And by definition, flooding the zone destroys all complexity and nuance. And you bring up an awesome point, which is if it doesn't get very deep, then everything is shallow, including your biases and hatreds, at least on the surface, right? Everyone's too busy yelling at each other, jockeying for position, for any truly coherent and even remotely persuasive argument to cut through.
Yeah, it's this conglomeration of contradictions in a way that everybody's got this massive platform where they can just shout out incessantly 24/7 about how there's no free speech. I mean, it's amazing to me, right? There hasn't been more free speech today. There's more free speech today, and trust me, like I came from Saudi fucking Arabia. Right? I know that what it's like not to have free speech. So when you're here and someone gets canceled off Twitter, and then they go on Rumble and they start making videos about how there's no free speech. That's not. You can still go out and say whatever you want to. You're not going to get thrown in jail or get your head cut off for saying what you want to say. And it's just everybody. There hasn't been more sort of free expression out there. And the thing is, it's not about, like, I think it's societal, a collective sort of intelligence of society is not based on how much free information there is out there. I think that makes the more free into the quantity of information and, free speech out there it should be allowed, but it kind of dumbs down things. It really is about the quality of information, and the quality dies down. It gets drowned out when you have a lot of noise. I mean, it's just, I think that that's something that I'm seeing. I am, and I'm going to say, I'm grateful for it. And I'm grateful for the fact that, people can say things. Another example, like Spitz, I mean, this, when the cartoons were happening and the Charlie Hebdo thing happened, one of the hashtags that was going around was spread the risk, right? So when everybody was going after Ayaan Hirsi Ali for what she said and they were trying to kill her. They're like, okay, well, why don't we all blaspheme and spread the risk so that there's no singular target? And it's safer for her, right? Will it make the discourse stupider over time? Are we going to get like really, really... It's a radical act to make a cartoon of Muhammad. That's great. It's a
and no disrespect intended to her, but it's made her kind of stupid as of late. So everyone is succumbing to this attention deficit acceleration.
Right. So and there is and so there are some of us. I think for me, it's always been about the ideas. I still like thinking of things. I feel like I've a big thing at that time was the atheist movement, right? So you had this big atheist movement after 9/11. I think 2001 is when the attacks happened. Around 2004 was the first book that came out from the New Atheists. It was by Sam Harris. It was called The End of Faith, where he slammed all religion, right? It was all equal opportunity. But the difference between him and these New Atheists versus the Bertrand Russells of the past, who had also written, Why I'm Not a Christian, everything, is that they included Islam. And they were more inclusive. Yeah. They didn't... They were like, okay, no, we're bringing it, because Bill Maher used to talk about it. He didn't really talk that much about Islam before. But now, the New Atheist movement had actually brought Islam into the fold. They were talking about that as well. And then you had Christopher Hitchens and his book, God is Not Great. You had Richard Dawkins with the God Delusion, which is just still today a classic. And you had Daniel Dennett, Breaking the Spell. And I would also include at that time Ayaan Hirsi Ali, before she... I don't know what happened to her, but before that time, she had a brilliant book called Infidel. That was her own memoir. So I'd include all of them together. And these books were just about reason and rationality, right? That we need reason. And Sam Harris famously said, he's like, once you present somebody with reason, an argument that's based on reason and it's rational, they're helpless but to come and be convinced by what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah, that's an almost Aristotelian sense of naivete.
Now, in retrospect, I loved it back then. I don't think he believes that either anymore. I'm not going to say.
Yeah, I like Sam Harris. Sometimes he's a little bit flighty, maybe a little bit idealistic. It's in the Nicomachean Ethics, I believe, where two complete strangers randomly run into each other in the desert. And if you tacitly assume that they're reasonable people, that they're fairly worldly and educated, bring up a topic, any topic, and ask them to discuss it, they'll be in agreement by virtue of their sense of general enlightenment and simply being cognitive, intelligent people. Not so sure about that. But these are all great points, and especially vibrant if we take a few steps back again through the lens of the era when you were writing the book.
Right.
We really need to talk about the Obama administration. It's political, but it also manifested culturally.
Yes.
When Obama first won, the nation was in shock, both out of gleeful surprise and terror. Yeah. You had an African-American man with the middle name Hussein, who became president of the United States of America. Now, I grew up as a first-generation Hungarian Jew in Chicago, Illinois, and they used to always tell me that anyone could be president, and that's why this country's so great. Well, the presidents are pretty homogeneous if you take a look at the gallery, until Barack Hussein Obama. Yeah. And this was astonishing, and it also precipitated a lot of this duality and polarization that has ensued, especially in his second term. You had the eruption of the Tea Party. You had this dissident movement where the right splintered itself into what would be constituted maybe as an extreme version of itself, although the Tea Party folks would categorically disagree. And they came to question foundational tenets, not only of liberalism and the left, but what the Republican Party and the conservative movement was ostensibly all about.
Right.
And that represented, in a sense, this boldness when it came to what could be construed as Islamophobia. They're different from us. We are an American Christian nation, and we've been putting up with a lot of shit that we don't have to put up with anymore. And the liberal backlash, as you've described, is to protect Muslims, all Muslims, give them kind of a hall pass for misogyny, homophobia, a long list of abuses, including some of the imperial tendencies even of an organization like ISIS, as it eventually came to be known.
I just want to say hashtag not all, right? These are statistically higher misogyny.
I'm talking in broad strokes for the sake of this historical kind of pageant.
Yeah.
And there you are, Mr. Ali Rizvi, by day healthcare marketing strategist, and you're a physician with expertise in medical science and writing. Mm-hmm. And by night, you were penning this book, which was Atheist Muslim, pretty much in an analogous sense that you could say Upper East Side Jew, which is you talk with your hands, you love to go to the theater, and you don't believe in God. You think all of that stuff is bullshit, and yet to the very core of your being, you could be Jewish. And with that came the Muslim-ish kind of movement.
Yeah. Shout out to Ibrahim Abdullah and Wissam Sharafuddin for coming up with that term. I love that term. If I knew, it really should be the name of the book, honestly. But fantastic.
The Muslimish Jewish, which, again, just to hit home for our listeners, what you were all about here is you can have your Eid celebration. You could even pray 5 times a day if you want. Do everything associated with your Muslim cultural regional identity, and do it with flair, do it with bravado, do it with shameless, relentless enthusiasm. But that doesn't mean you need to buy into the entire package, which could be inclusive of #jihad. Oh, yeah. And I think that's a brilliant kind of expose, especially through the analog of American Jewry for the most part, and this idea of secular humanism, which is there need not be a disconnect. It need not be mutually exclusive between your cultural beliefs and values, your identity as a human, but one divorced of an ideology which leads to extremist, inhumane, oppressive, and highly damaging practices. That's pretty much where you're at, right?
Yeah, I think you kind of summed it up. There's and it is interesting. Is going back to what you're saying about the liberals sort of protecting minorities. It is very interesting to this day to me that with liberals, they've had this alignment because they tend to have a lot of these communities, these minority communities, that are very loyal to them, like the Hispanic community, African American, the Black community, the Muslims, Arabs, Jewish people, pretty much all the minorities. They tend to gravitate towards Democrats. Thing is, some of the largest of these communities are also very culturally conservative. Culturally, they're conservative. And one pattern I've noticed, talk about the Obama years, and this may be a slight tangent, but one pattern I've noticed here is that whenever Democrats talk about cultural issues, they lose. They lose because, I've seen interviews on CNN of during the Kamala Harris election, of people going into barbershops, and there are men, black men, Hispanic men, Arab men, saying, they're like, well, do you think, it's like, well, I don't know if a woman should be president. I'm not sure about that. And then their wives are standing there. They're like, yeah, I don't think so. They just don't culturally. They were not ready for it. And I'm not saying all of them are like that. There's many of them who don't believe that, but absolutely in my community, in my culture, like in the Pakistani Indian community, even the people who are progressive and secular, they're like, I don't know if I'm going to vote for a woman. They're not there yet. But these are all people who would typically vote Democrat. Okay, so you had a huge increase in Hispanic men, black men, and Muslim men, Arab men, Pakistani men. I mean, people in my own extended family who are very, very pro MAGA, especially this last time round against Kamala Harris. So
yeah, Trump knew this.
Yeah,
he intuited it.
He is. He's got a massive talent for and capacity for cognitive empathy, not compassionate empathy, but what I think Paul Bloom talks about as cognitive empathy. That you can put yourself in other people's shoes and you can figure out what they're feeling. You don't feel it with them. I mean, you're still a little psychopathic. You're like, okay, well, whatever. But you know how you can manipulate it.
Trump is a lot like Madonna. You ready for this analogy? Madonna was always on the pulse of the type of music that was breaking in the clubs, mostly the gay clubs.
Yeah.
A year, 18 months before it got really hot. So there are a lot of young people now who think Madonna invented voguing. Remember her Vogue thing? So
yeah.
she sensed what was coming, and then like David Bowie became the Madonna persona in that genre or subgenre, and then she herself became an accelerant of that genre. And the list is long. Everything from disco in her early days. She went into electronic dance music later on. Yeah. And then even country music. Before Beyonce did her country transformation, Madonna went country. Remember that?
Yeah.
She's always been ahead of the curve and on the pulse. And in this exact same way, Donald Trump has at least since 2014, 2015, been just ahead of the curve. He sensed where it was going, and he had the belief in his own absurdity, and he also had the benefit of nothing to lose, because if he lost the presidential election, he still won because of the publicity and notoriety. He could throw it against the wall. Yeah. It was like that science fiction novel and movie Ender's Game, when the kid's just doing a simulation and he's actually controlling the entire Starfleet. And since he feels he's just doing a throwaway experiment, he does something bold to win the battle. And Trump has been kind of like that from the beginning.
He has been. And I think that one of the main thing that disabused me of this notion that, rationality and reason will make people helpless to come to you, which I do think in the long term that is true. Like that, if you're looking across decades and everything, the science eventually wins, and those are these you can't deny it. But when it comes to the short term, that's just not true. What wins is stories. Storytelling wins. That was one of the atheist and secular movement's biggest miss. It was the biggest miss. They were providing rationality, reason, logic, and it resonated for a while. But it provided the message without the meaning. The reason people go towards religion, they want a sense of meaning. They want a sense of belonging. And they did not get that with it. And one of the things that, and every time, I think that the most powerful thing for atheists, and I think this could be potentially the future of where this goes. And this is, I'm going to get into remember I said I had this accidental discovery. So should I go into that really quickly? I think you're going to like this.
Rock and roll.
All right. So my accidental discovery, right, was happened, I think, it was around 2015, 2016, when the Lee Rigby killing happened. I think someone who was claiming to be from ISIS went and killed a British soldier in the street, broad daylight. It's very tragic, kind of like very brutally murdered him, as ISIS does, or as these sort of like ISIS aficionados do.
It was just for the sake of our listeners, it was a copycat ISIS killing.
There were a lot of copycat, ISIS people who claimed to be representing them. So it was really the ideology that spread more than anything else. So when that Lee Rigby killing happened, I was on a HuffPost live panel. HuffPost used to have a little sort of TV type thing at that time, and Josh Sepps was moderating it. And they had several Muslims to come up and talk about it. And this is where the title of my book really, I was vindicated a little bit after all the criticism of it being an oxymoron. But they had a Sunni Muslim, they had a Shia Muslim, they had an Ahmadi Muslim, and then they had the Atheist Muslim. Now these were non-Muslim white hosts and producers who had put together this panel. And to them, it just made sense. You're Sunni Muslim, Shia Muslim, and you got the Atheist Muslim. The other three Muslims were furious. I don't want to speak to them and say they were furious, but they're like, what is this guy doing? I could see it in their eyes. Like, what's he doing? I showed up and was like, yeah. And they were asking me questions, and I was saying everything I wanted to say. And that was my accidental discovery. I think the thing that is more of a threat to these sort of religious dogmatic type of people is not outright apostasy. It's not apostatizing from the faith, but co-opting it. Nothing riles up priests and pastors and websites like Christianity Today more than when Richard Dawkins says he's a cultural Christian. When he says, yeah, I go to church and I sing Christmas carols, that drives them insane. When he says, I'm an atheist, I don't believe in it, they're like, oh, okay, you don't believe in this. Okay, we're going to do our thing. You do your thing. He's like, why are you coming into our... And that was the accidental discovery that I found with the Atheist Muslim. When I talked about the idea of like retaining the traditions, right? And I'm going to read a little quote to you that was, in response. It was from Christianity Today. And this guy named Russell Moore was writing something about, Richard Dawkins, reacting to Richard Dawkins saying he's a cultural Christian. But with me, that's what happened. Co-opting the faith was more threatening to them. Co-opting the faith in a sort of a non-religious way is more threatening to them, to the religious people, than outright rejecting it. And they would tell me, they're like, well, why are you calling yourself a Muslim? Why are you on this like Muslim panel? Why is your name still Ali Rizvi? You need to change your name. You can't just keep the identity and get rid of the ideology. That's not how it works. And so one thing that I'll just read out that quote from Russell Moore. So he said, this is when Richard Dawkins would say he was a cultural Christian. He said, quote, this kind of Christianity hollows out the Christian religion far more efficiently than straightforward attempts to convince people that God is a delusion. It defeats Christianity by replacing the living God with a God who is, in fact, a delusion. It inhabits the husk of the religion, paganizing it until one can toss away the shell. Right? And the title of this article was New Atheism Finally Learns How to Destroy Christianity. It is about co-opting it and not rejecting it. So that was one of my, I think, favorite discoveries about this. It is about the power of storytelling. It's about not just reason, rationality. It's about saying, okay, you still have your community. You still have a sense of belonging, right? You can.
I just want to clarify for listeners, though, that your intent is not to hollow out religion from the inside and
it's
destroy
not. It's
it.
Accidental. That's why it's an accidental side of
it. That's conveyed through that quote, which shows you the power of this approach. But reading your book, you made clear repeatedly throughout the text that your mission wasn't ostensibly to destroy religion, but to, on the one hand, provide an alternative and also demonstrate convincingly that one could actually be an atheist Muslim. It
Yeah.
sounds like an oxymoron, but it can make sense again in the same way. I was walking in New York and I walked right by an old guy with a younger Asian woman holding his hand.
Oh, was he
And then I
Jewish?
turned and I was like,
You ran into Woody Allen?
that that's Woody Allen and
Oh,
and his Korean daughter wife. and and when I hear you talking about that's the model that Woody Allen from the beginning was an atheist. He was the atheist Jew. But
yeah.
Woody Allen is synonymous with a New York Jew. He is
Yeah.
the quintessential New York Jew, and he's an atheist.
Yeah.
So that defeats the argument, right? Which is Jew out. Be a super Jew.
Yeah.
And Jews have reached at the point where aspirationally, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, you'd be thrilled if big
Yeah.
chunks of the Muslim world could go Woody Allen on this stuff, which is, you have your Eid celebration and you're doing this and you're doing that. And
You could bring beer to your Ramadan iftar party.
and then fast during the day and party all night for a month. Imagine the rave. But who are we doing this with and for? Well, go for it.
Yeah. Can I read another quote about this aspect of things, because I think it's kind of important. It'll kind of lead us into what I was going to talk about a little bit next. But there's a sociologist named Phil Zuckerman, also Jewish, right, but also an atheist. He really is one of my favorite writers and one of my favorite thinkers. So he wrote a book in 2016, around the same time, called "Living the Secular Life: New Answers to Old Questions." Where I think he was it was an interview with the same thing. Sam Harris had interviewed him, and he was talking about secularizing religion, which is, a similar concept to the atheist Muslim. And he really liked the atheist Muslim. He was, I ended up, he wrote to me, I read his new book a few years ago, and then I blurbed it and all that. So he's been fantastic. And secularizing religion, and his whole idea was to do exactly what, I was talking about here. Right, that he thought about. He's like, keep the rituals. This is a quote. Keep the rituals, the holidays, the buildings, the gatherings, the knickknacks, but let the supernatural beliefs wither and fade. The example of this that first comes to mind is Reform Judaism. Right, so you're talking about the atheist Jews. Most American Jews get what they want out of Judaism, what they like out of Judaism. The ceremonies, the holidays, the sense of belonging, multi-generational connections, opportunities for charity. And yet they have jettisoned the supernatural beliefs. Many liberal Episcopalian congregations, too, are in this vein, also Quaker meetings, and most Scandinavians with their modern form of Nordic Lutheranism are as well. So they observe the traditional religious holidays, and they participate in various life cycle rituals. They congregate now and then in church. They even, quote unquote, feel Christian. And yet they do all of these ostensibly religious things without a scintilla of actual faith in the supernatural. So he says, personally, I think it would be great to have Catholicism, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, etc., all existing here and there, but neutered of their supernatural hoo-ha. I know that may seem contradictory or absurd, but I believe it's possible. I don't even think it's just possible. Actually, I think it's natural. I think it's inevitable. It's already happened, right? We're seeing it now. I mean, when I see, one of the things we're talking about, what changed and what 2001, you had the towers getting knocked down, people saying this all over the place. And then you also had attacks in London on the subway system there, right? The tube system happened around 2001, 2002. Both of those cities have secular minded Muslim mayors now. And these are not like Muslim, like bearded, hijabi Muslim, and whatever the politics. I don't know if you agree with it or not. That's up to you. But they're decent men, right? Who are, come from, they are very American. And, at least like, for example, Zoran Mamdani, right? It's a very American guy. His dad is a super liberal, agnostic, professor in a university, married a Hindu woman, which, by the way, in Islam makes his kids all illegitimate. You're allowed to marry Jews and Christians, but not Hindus, not idolaters, right? Because she's a polytheist. Never asked her to convert. Mira and I are still Hindu, but she's also secular. And, then this kid is born, he grows up, he's marching at, pride parades. He's campaigning in gay clubs. He's out there. His wife, dresses like an Instagram model. He's exactly the kind of, when I was writing about the atheist Muslim, he never really talks about those things. He just says he only talks about his Muslim as an identity, right? He'll hang out with rabbis at one point, and then conservative weird imams on the other. He'll do all of those things. You just notice it a lot more when he's hanging out with imams. But he always talks about being Muslim as an identity, and really never talks about the ideology. The only thing he talks about is just secular economics, policy, rights for all kinds of different people, pro-trans, pro-gay, pro-woman. And there is a pro-free speech, pro-critical, thinking, pro-open inquiry. It's a fairly articulate guy. And yes, you may not agree with his politics. You may think he's, a communist or socialist or, whatever you want to fucking call him. But, this is it's very different. This is a kind of, when we were talking about an integrated Muslim, right? Muslims integrating and being part of the melting pot. Your Fareed Zakarias, your Zoran Mamdanis, whatever their diversity in political thought. These are the people that...
Now, some listeners might say that, okay, that's all well and good, but there's an Islamist tinge in his anti-Zionism. And as a Jew, I would counter that by reminding the skeptic that there are many, many Jews, especially young New York Jews, who are very pro-Palestinian and even pro-Hamas.
Mm-hmm.
So this idea that Zoran is necessarily Islamist by want of his anti-Zionism doesn't necessarily cut muster, because he's pretty much in agreement with, I would say, a majority of young Jews in New York.
So that's interesting. Now, the thing is, if he was a 55-year-old man and he was really against, he's like, you could make an argument that maybe there is some anti-Semitism there, but he's completely in line with his generation. He's 33 years old. 67% of Jewish people in New York, Jewish New Yorkers between the ages of 18 and 44, and this is as of July 2025, after he'd already won the primary, 67% of Jewish people ages 18 to 44 supported Mamdani. They were, and many of them, like a large majority, over 50% of Jewish people and just young Americans in general are against what Netanyahu's done. The problem with I'll tell you something. Like ISIS, let's see, now everyone's going to say you're comparing ISIS to this, but like I think ISIS and fundamentalist warmongering Muslim groups really turned a lot of Muslims away from the faith overall. They don't want to be associated with it. And if you want to blame anybody for what's happened, you got to blame Netanyahu. Whether it's his PR, whether it's the kind of dumb things he's been doing, whether it's the way that he speaks about and disses the American president, Republican or Democrat, whoever. I mean, he's losing support everywhere across the board. Conservatives.
Well, blowing up half of Gaza probably helped too, but we could definitely get into that. But I want to dial it back for a second to focus on this idea of the secular Muslim, the secular Jew. And I want to reinforce the comment that you made just a few seconds ago, where you said it's happening, it's already prevalent. And to ramp it up a little bit more, think about everyone who is ostensibly religious. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter what religion, whether it's Zen Buddhism or or Protestantism or anything. Have a conversation with them, or make an attempt to have a conversation with them about who or what they think God is.
Mm-hmm.
And what you'll find very rapidly is that beneath the veneer of their religiosity, beneath the surface of their ostensibly more conservative ideology about theology, there's not that much going on. And I don't mean to say anything disparaging about the average human,
Right.
but frankly, it doesn't get very deep at all.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying here is I'm trying to reinforce your notion that most people already, whether they acknowledge it or not, are mostly secular.
Yeah.
Because they have a gut feeling that they are religious. But cognitively and even emotionally, that belief doesn't get them very far, aside from there's this God thing.
Mm-hmm.
And this God thing is in control of everything, made the universe, and that's just the way it is. And I better not sin or I'll go to hell.
Right.
That's about it.
I
I
was talking yesterday during the talk, and I wasn't planning to say this, but I actually just was thinking out loud. And I remembered when I used to watch in the 90s, I used to watch the X-Files, or there was, amazing stories, and you had like all these really cool.
You either wanted to have sex with the guy or the gal, depending on your biological identity and your sexual orientation. You found them both sexy, right? So, and then the one that you didn't want to have sex with was the one you wanted to be like. Like, I want to be like, Dubrovny or whatever. And I want to have sex with her, or I want to be fabulous. I want to be Scully. Yeah, I want to be fabulous like her, so I could, have sex with a guy like that. Everyone loves the X-Files. Yeah,
quite a digression. But I had so this was the digression, two-way digression, from a digression actually. And now we're really getting into meta digressions. But I used to watch the X-Files and Amazing Stories and all these like cool shows, and there would be a mystery, and you're wondering what the mystery. And sometimes you keep on watching. At the end of the season, the mystery would be resolved with a supernatural explanation. Not even like a Deus Ex Machina thing, but like just a supernatural explanation. Oh, it was a demon that did it. There were these angels that came down. Whatever. And it was totally satisfying. Now, I never see that. That was the norm for a lot of the shows. Now, I never see that because those shows nobody watches. Everybody who sees the end is like, oh, a ghost did it? Okay, fuck this. I'm never watching the show again. It's not. And that's actually quite telling to me too, that people just don't have it. And I think there's a reason for it. And this is an experience that I probably have that's a little unique compared to most people in America and Canada, is in Saudi Arabia, when Denzel Washington shot Malcolm X, he came to Mecca to shoot it. Now, in Mecca, non-Muslims are not allowed. Denzel is not Muslim. I did not know that happened. Nobody in Saudi Arabia knew that happened. They shot the whole movie. Spike Lee and him, they came there. They shot it on site at the Kaaba. Nobody knew it happened. It wasn't in any of the newspapers. All of the international newspapers we used to get, like Time and Newsweek, had it. They'd rip out the pages. They would censor the news. They'd go through every copy that they were selling in the country, and there was a group of people who would censor things and rip out pages that they didn't want people to read. And I only found out months later. I went for our summer vacation to Pakistan to visit relatives. That's when I found out that had happened. Now, the Saudi government did not want people to know that because there would have been an outrage. Like, why would you allow non-Muslims into Mecca? That's how protected the news was. And so, and I'd like to. So I try to tell my daughter this. She doesn't fully understand. Like if you went and you took vacation pictures, got them developed, a few days later, and I wanted to come and show them to you, Spitz, I couldn't. Right? Like I'd have to physically take them and bring them to your house, or you'd have to come to my house to see them. If I wanted you to hear a song, I'd have to play it on the phone. Maybe that was but pictures I could never transmit. So news was very, very easy to censor. It was very easy to keep your population siloed and isolated from the world, the way that North Korea still does. I think North Korea is probably the only country that still does. But, when you grow up thinking that there's a divine truth that you've been exposed to, you've been given it, and you're Muslim, you really think the rest of the world is like that. You watch movies and things like, okay, that's all fantasy. You don't connect with it as much. But then when you're able eventually to get online and talk on a discussion forum about your hobby, science fiction, to some kid in Japan who grew up with a completely different faith system, or some kid, you actually, on the internet, you're able to connect with all of these people, and the government can't do a fucking thing to stop it, right? Because you're always going to find ways around it. And suddenly, you're seeing images of, you've been taught your entire life that Iran is, we had a picture of Khomeini. Actually, I'm from a Shia Muslim family. He had a picture that he was revered. He was a hero. Many people thought of him almost like a messiah. And then, I remember 2009 is the first time I ever saw just crowds that you couldn't see the end of coming out and protesting against Khomeini. The only protests we'd seen were, death to America, death to America. And now they're protesting against the regime, and they're doing it while the besieging militia is going out and trying to gun them down. And we saw this on Twitter and on YouTube. There's no, the kind of things that we were exposed to was very different. I think a lot of the reason that secularism is happening and people are not taking their own fates that they were born into that seriously is because they're just realizing, they're like, all right, there's this girl that I'm having, webcam sex with who's over in Sweden, right? And
you're speaking rhetorically, I'm assuming.
Yes, I am. I'm not. Oh yeah, don't. Yeah, you can clip this out, and there you go. That's it. And I'm having this, and this girl, she has, she's been raised totally differently, but we totally connect. We like each other, and we're really the same, but we just believe different things because of where we were born, and that's a really stunning revelation. And the other thing is that the scriptures have become more transparent, right? Like at that time, I wrote about this in the book too. I had to if I wanted to find out what's in the Quran, I just hear it in Arabic all the time. The vast majority of the world's Muslims don't speak Arabic. Most populous Muslim countries in the world, like Indonesia, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, like all the way until you get to Egypt, you don't even get to an Arabic speaking country, right? They don't understand the Quran, but now, and at that time, we'd find translations, paperbacks. You'd have to leaf through them. They wouldn't have things like sex slavery in the index, right, of the Quran. They're not going to have it, even so. But when you have Google and you have websites where they actually go into, you can hover over an Arabic word and they'll give you translations in 10 different languages. And
AI, we're going to talk about AI.
Yeah, we're going to talk about AI, but like even prior to AI, right? Like there's when you just had the internet and you had social media, these things became transparent, and people are like, okay, so this is the word of God. It's telling me that sperm is created in the chest. That God created you from a fluid that's ejected between the backbone and the ribs. That's Surah 85, verses 5-7. You can look it up. Biologically incorrect. That's just not how it happened. And we're finding these things, and this is becoming transparent to kids as young as 12. Right? So the fact that disparate communities with disparate upbringings are interacting with each other through these, absolutely revolutionary channels that are completely unprecedented. There's no history that this is repeating. It's not history repeats itself. This is completely novel, right? And it's just going to dilute this whole idea of faith. So it's going to dilute the idea of God. You've got the Neil deGrasse Tyson quote about how it's the God of the gaps is, and it's just an ever receding pocket of ignorance. And now when I talk to people who are religious, especially young people who are religious, and they ask me, they're like, you're an atheist. How did everything happen? And what I tell them, and I really do think this, is that my idea of atheism wasn't that, I think that there is no higher power. I'm very, very 50-50 about that. Like literally 50-50 about it. I just don't think it tells you, not to eat bacon and who you can fuck at night, right? Like, I just don't think that anything that, so but this is what I tell the kids. I'm like, listen, you look out into the night sky. You're not just looking into distance, you're looking back in time. Okay. You travel near the speed of light, time slows down. If there was a photon that started, because photons are massless, if it started at the time of the Big Bang and it ends up on your face 13.8 billion years later, to that photon, it didn't experience the time at all. It was an instant. You've got binary pulsars, you've got like supernovae and you've got all these amazing things. I just think that what religion does is it infantilizes God. It makes him very small, anthropomorphizes him, it just turns him into like this human thing that's angry and jealous and all that. So that's why I don't believe it. That's why I'm an atheist. I'm like nearly 100% sure all of this stuff is bullshit. And if there is a God, I don't know what it's like. There may be, there may not be. I don't know who it is.
But you're a cognitive guy. You're an MD. Mm-hmm. You're a doctor. You're obviously well read. You've written books. You've given presentation. You're a worldly, scholarly, highly educated person.
Oh God, my mom would disagree.
Many folks love religion or embrace religion for exactly the opposite reason. Kierkegaard put it pretty well, ironically, existentially enough, that the more absurd the statement is, the more it hits me here and the more I'm going to believe. And you talked about the power of storytelling.
I was just going to say that's
and the challenge with science and the secular view, and this is what you were hinting at earlier, is that as the world migrates from one of ideology and argument to one of attention getting and basically bullshitting, then what's being lost is, on the one hand, a lot of that religious fervor and ideology, but also deeper meaning and stories.
Mm-hmm.
So the challenge, and again, you mentioned this earlier too, that if you take on this mantle of secular humanist, of atheist Muslim, of Upper East Side Jew, then you got to replace the passion of religion with something else. Jung put it very, very well, that if you would destroy all of human history, the next generation who would have to reinvent itself from scratch would start with religion, just because it's innate, it's built into us to have the dopamine triggers associated with the gods and the goddesses and all that stuff that we could dismiss as bullshit when, black holes bend space and time, and there could be a multiverse of infinite possibility, and numbers get to the point where they're actually inconceivably vast. Busy Beaver 6 is a 10 million Ackerman number, which is 10 to the 10 million stacked high. That's just Busy Beaver 6. Now, what do you think Busy Beaver 7 is? Now, to me as a geek, that's religious. That is so inconceivably mind-blowing that it pales in comparison to Moses on the mountaintop getting the word of God etched into tablets. That's child's play compared to Busy Beaver 6.
That's what Einstein called the feeling of religiosity.
100%. But how do you make secularism sexy? How do you infuse the passion that we feel about science and understanding the world And for me, the world of mathematics and all of its possibilities, and how the world of mathematics and the world of nature are entwined, at least in this universe, in an incredibly consistent way. How do you
I
do
think you
that
just
for culture? How do you do that for our beliefs?
I think you just gave me the title of the sequel, which is making secularism sexy. Yeah,
That would
that's
be good.
incredible.
I thought it was Busy Beaver 7. I don't think that
No,
would.
I don't think that's a you Google that shit. You Google, yeah, that's not a good thing to
That
Google.
could be a kink. That could be a good kink book.
Yeah,
On,
you kink. Yeah, this is great. I when you talk about how it's been innate to for humans to create gods, right? Like you started over to start. It's not as much the creating of gods as it is where did we come from and where are we going? Like, what is the meaning of all of this? The gods are just one answer to that, right? That's an answer. In the past, that god was the sun. We figured out what that was. It was like rain. It was animism, like, cows and pigs and shit like that. And then eventually, there was this unseen god that nobody could tell because everything else had been demystified. And as you go on and you demystify more things, that idea becomes less and less sort of fantastical and awe-inspiring. So so it really is a question of people wanting to know what their origin was and where they're going, what their purpose and what the meaning of their life is. And that is actually the our instinct to try and find meaning in our life is, I think, could really be a function of evolution, and especially the evolution of long-term memory. When you develop long-term memory, you evolve to have long-term memory where you can have memories, you can have learnings from the past that you can cognitively process, not just like animals do in terms of, okay, I learned how to walk, I learned how to not, get eaten by, a predator or whatever. But you can actually in a complicated way, you can understand you have this cognitively, you are able to comprehend the idea of death and how permanent it is and that everything's temporary and potentially meaningless. And then you also have the same instinct of self-preservation that a bacterium has, right? And you're living with both of those absolute realities that you cannot deny, right? And they both exist, and you don't know how to resolve that conflict. And you have the gift of long-term memory. You're going to naturally come up with the idea of purpose. Because that is a long-term thing. Creating goals, making a plan, accomplishing things, getting things done before a certain time, the idea of chronology and limited chronology, like that's all something that evolves. So a lot of it really was about finding those things. And we have examples of people who've made science sexy. Now, the thing is that let's talk first about why religion endures and where the power of storytelling comes in. We talked a lot about Trump and Hillary Clinton. I think I've given you this example before, but I'll just say it for the audience really quickly, is that the difference in that election, this, I mean, you're interested in political strategy, so you understand this kind of thing, where the way that Hillary had good policies. She's obviously a very, very smart person. She's more experienced than Donald Trump, has been in the game for a long time, and gave really good, but the way she presented her policies, there was no sort of overarching vision. It was like a list of bullet points, on a PDF or on a PowerPoint. Like, we're going to do this and this and this and this. This is the issue. This is the solution. Issue, solution. It's data. It's essentially a data dump. When Trump came in and Sarah Palin, it's like, drill, baby, drill. Build the wall. They've got death panels. You're going to get Mexico to pay for it. Make America great again. Whatever you think of that, whether you agree with it or not, it's a story. Okay, and stories are so powerful. Stories are so powerful that they can bypass your rationality. They can supersede your rationality. They can completely bulldoze over even empathy, right? If you and again, with our messaging, we do it all the time. We always create stories. We have in healthcare marketing, we create patient profiles. We can put a face to to the idea, right? You're scrolling on your Instagram feed, you see a hospital, told you this before too, of 200 beds. We've got 200 kids with leukemia in this building. Yeah, can you donate? Nobody's going to fucking donate. Everyone's going to go right past it. You show a picture of one child, looks like your kid who's got leukemia. Can you please donate? That one kid is going to get all the money because there's a story. Okay, so stories are immensely, immensely powerful. And so far, they've only been used by a lot of demagogues, religions. They've used art, right? They've used the musicality of the prayer call that moves people to tears, or the recitation of the Quran is called tilawat, or they do when they read it in a musical way. You've got the gospel choirs, and you've got this beautiful architecture in churches. You go to the Vatican, you've got 4 painted rooms with Raphael's paintings and the Sistine Chapel and all these Michelangelo sculptures, and it's all the Hinduism. We've got the music, the art, the culture, all of that is something that moves people, resonates with them emotionally. And within that, when you have people feeling things, you can really package up any idea and transmit it in a way that they will absorb it. They will create those associations. Now, can we do that with reality? Can we do that with science? We can. We just don't want to do it. Like half of the academics I talk to, when you tell them about it, you're like, oh, Carl Sagan was amazing, or Neil deGrasse Tyson's amazing. Like they'd be like, oh, they're all sellouts. And I hear people talk about Andrew Huberman that way. Well, he's a dick. He just kind of sold out. The real academics that are sitting here publishing papers. Like, okay, that's great. And what's happening with the papers? Like, how are you going to translate that? You're just going to data dump the same shit to people who are not going to be able to comprehend it. And if you don't do it, if you don't make it sexy, if you don't do the kind of thing that Neil deGrasse Tyson does, or the kind of thing that Carl Sagan did, or the kind of books that Richard Dawkins writes, where you read about science, you read The Blind Watchmaker. It's a scientific book, but you're riveted when you're reading it. You're riveted because
you are, but you're still talking to a fairly niche audience. And in the world of attention, it's gotten even more crowded. Yeah. You have a long tail, like what in marketing we call the long tail. Like you're not just looking for furniture, you're looking for patio furniture, and you're not just looking for patio furniture, you're looking for one of those wrought iron little chairs, right?
Targeted.
So that petty example just illustrates that you're a Dawkins fan, and I love all those folks. Like Veritasium, Derek Mueller on YouTube is one of my all-time favorite science storytellers. The guy is awesome sauce. Yeah. And he gets tens of millions of views, but it's still very, very niche. And if we take a look a little bit further back, how did we get on the moon? We got on the moon because we didn't want the Soviets to get there first. So you need passionate motivation that underlies it. So for most organized religion, it's I don't want to go to hell. And I know I'm a sinner. And I want to go to heaven. And also in this life here, I need if God exists, maybe this dude can help me out. Yeah. And if I give to my church and if I participate in this religion stuff, then if any of that's true in the way I understand it to be, then it's going to benefit me and my family, I would hope. So I'm going to believe and I'm going to do that. These are motivators. These are visceral, almost Maslow pyramid motivators. Yeah. The mind alone, the imagination alone is insufficient to get a lot of people to do stuff. And I think the next leap, I'm just challenging your argument a little bit that, you got Science Girl. She's another great science educator, and you've got several women doing this now too. And many of them are enticing and warm, and they give a new dimension to the Carl Sagan billions and billions stuff that we grew up with. And it's awesome. But once again, their level of attention and exposure is minuscule, insignificant to religion on the one hand, and even ESPN and other stuff. How come stadiums don't fill up to watch Magnus Carlsen play somebody in blitz chess? Most people don't give a shit. They don't care. And I could go on here and say that, the Schwarzschild radius of a black hole for the Earth is the size of a dime. Doesn't that blow your mind? And 99% of the people listening to this podcast will be like, yeah, Mook, that's great. What is that the best you can do?
Well, I'll go another. So we talked about Carl Sagan and Neil deGrasse Tyson and stuff, and how they make science sexy. They tell it in the same way that people tell stories about other things, and it's just based on reality. There's also another aspect of it. Okay, and first. There were lots of books that were written about the Knights Templar and this alternative version of Christianity that you'd seen in the Da Vinci Code, but it never really hit mainstream. And we're talking mainstream; we're not just talking niche. That's one of the best-selling books of all time, fiction books that introduced the world into this entire alternative version of Christianity, communicated it through fiction. Animal Farm did that. In 1984 did that. Now, when you ask all of these like big sort of tech people or scientific innovators, Elon Musk or Sam Altman or you ask them what inspired them, they're not going to tell you about some paper they read in a journal. Oh, I used to read a lot of academics. This is my favorite academic, Professor so and so from Oxford. Really, that's not what they say. They talk about Star Trek, talk about 2001: A Space Odyssey, right? Arthur C. Clarke. They talk about all of them. Basically were breastfed science fiction. They grow up, they consume the shit out of it, and that's what they got into. They watch, they'll talk about Marvel comics. Those are the things that inspire people. That's what makes things sexy, makes people want to do great things and make things that are sort of fictional, just cool ideas possible. So I think there are many dimensions to that. I'm not disagreeing with you completely. I do think that it's a niche audience. It is a harder thing to make reality sexy. I mean, if you tell somebody that, hey, there's a multiverse or that this is how the Big Bang happened. There's this infinitely, dense spot, and time did not exist at the time when time slows down, and you can talk about all of these things, and it's gonna go right over there. Like, that sounds insane. That's ridiculous, even though there's evidence for it that it actually happened that way. But when you tell them, God said, "Let there be light," and there was light, and all these animals got onto a board, and God is Indian, always in my imagination. So when you tell them that, it's just a lot easier to process. It's the end of the what was it, the Life of Pi, the story with the tiger, right? The end of it, he just told him, he's like, and I'm spoiling it here. The end of it, he asks him, he's like, well, is all of that true? And he goes, I don't know. What if it wasn't? What if the real story was really fucking boring? And what I just told you, he's like, which story do you want to believe? He's like, well, I like the story with the tiger, and you guys like kicking it with the tiger. Because I'm totally paraphrasing. He's like, that's what we do. We like the stories that are just more appealing to us, right? So it is. I think it is doable, and I think there are people who do it, and I think it is getting better. I mean, but I think the future really is in storytelling, is in fiction, is in the ideas that, even all these ideas that the new atheists had, and all these things that they want to talk about, put it in a Netflix series. Do it like Aziz Ansari did in whatever show is, the Mind of Master or something like that, Master of None, right? Or like Kumail Nanjiani did. These are both like Muslim people from Muslim origins who were ex-Muslims essentially, and he did it through with the Big Sick, where he showed his own struggles with the religious belief and normalized going through that struggle and making it seem completely normal. I mean, those are the things that when people, even with other conceptual things that we think are correct, like gay rights, do you remember the 80s when, the F word, the derogatory slur for gay people was all over the place, ubiquitous. We used to say it in the schoolyard. I used to say it. Everybody used to call each other.
Yeah, now you can't even say it on my podcast.
You can't.
We grew up with it.
I don't believe in saying it. I don't want to say
those small sticks that you would use to build the
throw
fire.
in the fire. And the reason that it was named after that is because that's what they used to do with gay people. They used to throw them in fire, so they used to use that term, a bundle of sticks, for them, right? So you have that slur. You had people, mainstream people, just nobody wanted to have same-sex marriage. All of that changed within, I think, less than a decade, with stuff like Will and Grace and Ellen DeGeneres and the people's kids and everything, the coming out movement. All of that changed, and people started, because human beings in their lives. I mean, these are stories, fiction stories. Fiction is a great way to communicate nonfiction ideas, right? And these people knew it. Arthur C. Clarke and Isaac Asimov, and these are even filmmakers, right? And the people who made the comic books and all that. I mean, these are people who knew this, and they.
Well, you're talking to a science fiction writer here.
There you go.
Published my first science fiction, so I'm agreeing. I'm in violent agreement with everything you're saying. And you've got this Hegelian teleology going on, that we're getting more and more enlightened, that we're adapting our storytelling instincts to go beyond the ultra simplistic, often brutal stories that we grew up with in our entrenched, especially Western religions. Mm-hmm. And we're becoming more adaptive. We're becoming more curious. And with the infusion of the evolution of science, it's getting exciting. And the proof of that might be the top 100 grossing movies of all time. I think the latest tally is more than 80% of them, maybe as many as 85%, are science fiction or fantasy.
Yeah.
So people love spectacle, and they love to think outside themselves. And again, they love that dopamine rush of expansive possibility. I think that's built into us too. And maybe you're right. Maybe with time, there's this movement toward something that's ostensibly more secular, yet equally fascinating and engaging on this gut level that could be called spiritual. I would love to believe that. But I'm also a creature here in 2025, which is an American who has experienced the backlash to the backlash to the backlash. We tend to be a highly polarized society, especially politically and culturally.
Yeah.
And what was progressive and humanistic, where are we at? 9 months ago is now woke bullshit, DEI oppression, and in need of recalibration.
DEI is Donald Trump Jr., Eric, and Ivanka, right?
Oh, okay. Good. We good. See, we could reinterpret everything to suit. But if I could bring us back to the home base here of the conversation, is both of us are in this violent agreement that this kind of evolution is healthy, it's necessary, and you, with the writing of your book, have created a model or a paradigm for its evocation. And by that, I mean you grew up in a very fundamentalist, some would say even ideologically extremist society. Free speech was suppressed. Religions that weren't yours or the majority were discriminated against to the point of violence and separation. You come to the West, to Canada, and you're swimming, you're lavishing yourself with a society that has embraced liberalism, the greatest results of the Renaissance, free speech, tolerance, humanism. And you wrote this book as almost a treatise that expresses your belief that it's not only feasible, but it's necessary, and to the points you're making right now is becoming increasingly prevalent. Is that a way to kind of bring this around and together? That we're looking at the future of society, not just Western society through this idealistic but hopefully pragmatic lens, where we could shed the skin, if you will, of ideological, theocratic, or theological extremism, which limits the human capacity for tolerance and also wonder.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's it, and I think it's happening. I get accused a lot by my friends, and of being too much of an optimist, putting too much of a rosy spin on things, and even on terrible things. And I was glad to know. I spoke to Steve Pinker about this. So Steven Pinker, he's like he gets the same kind of crap about just being like everything's better now. Yeah, I know. Well, you think that's worse? Even that's better.
I like Pinker a lot. I mean, the
Yeah, I do too.
statistics and data are on his side.
Well, that's the thing. It's just about statistics and data. And I, even before I knew who he was, I was kind of looked at that. You talked about the Obama election. The Obama election was when things like that happen, and they're so stark and so different from before. I mean, this is happening like just 40 years after the Civil Rights Act, right? 1964. And when something like this happens, and it's so massive and so unprecedented, it does shake up the world in a way that it's going to cause an intense backlash. And those backlashes can be really, really powerful. And history is replete with examples of them. They're often temporary, but you wouldn't know it when you're living through it, right? I'm sure that the people who were living through World War II, when Hitler was taking over all of Europe, you've seen those TV shows with the alternate histories and everything. I don't think that they thought
the man in the dark castle.
Yeah, so it was like, okay, we've got this thing on this side, this thing on this side.
Fatherland was a big bestseller, I think, in the 80s. Is that
Yeah?
Right? Does that go all the way back to the 80s?
I don't know. I haven't heard of Fatherland. I've just seen, I know that there was a show, I think, on
another Hitler won the war kind of movie.
Yeah. So, and that was, history is replete with things like that, where there is a backlash. Now, people who were living at that time were seeing this thing happening, this guy just going around, just taking over all of these countries, and the leaders of those countries coming and, appeasing. Who was the guy who just said, okay, yeah, take
Chamberlain.
Chamberlain, right? So like he's just people just appeasing him, just laying themselves down flat for him to walk all over. All these things happening. The people who were living there did not know that was only going to happen for like decade, less than a decade, right? No, they didn't know that. They didn't know that it was so temporary. It was devastating, extremely destructive, right? Millions and millions of people died, but it was still a backlash. And then the world moved on to another place, a better place, right? It's a similar kind of thing. When you have a massive, massive change, like what you had with the Obama election, and then you have a guy who says this guy wasn't even born here. Trump, 2012, his second term, was when he came out and started talking about the birtherism.
Yeah, that was Trump's ticket to ride, the birtherism. Trump's entire political career is anchored in a racist lie. People forget that.
He took the Tea Party, right, some of their basest beliefs, and just made them not just not just gave them the courage to voice it, but made them think that if they voice it, that it's more righteous, right? That they're fighting against something, which is similar to what sort of Hitler did in a way. So these are, and this is my spin on it. A lot of times when you see these intense backlashes, they're not regressions as much as they are sort of the symptoms of a world that's moving to a better place. I mean, there are going to be people going to drag it down. And what Steven Pinker told me, I asked him about that analogy between all these like sort of like MAGA right-wing people, the Christian Taliban that's now the Supreme Court rolling back abortion rights and banning books and pretty much doing what the Islamic theocracy did. It's turning into that. There's a reason Jordan Peterson has such a massive following among Muslim men. Andrew Tate actually converted to the religion. Wonder why, right? Like you think so that the right wing, we used to talk about the left's alignment with Muslims. Now you have the right's alignment with actual Islamic doctrine, which is insane. You've got the trad wife culture and all this. Everybody's buying into it. So and it's happening mainstream. This is at the level of the highest institutions in the United States, right? And it's so you have this sort of, is this reaction? To talk to Stephen Pinker, I was like, is this the kind of reaction that jihadists are having too? Because jihadists are seeing this. They're seeing more and more of the youth connecting with other people around the world through the internet, becoming more and more secular, losing the faith. These old mullahs, right, who were big sort of thinkers and influencers in the world, they have entire episodes of how we're losing the Muslim youth to atheism. Okay, I have kids in the community. They go to mosques, they get little leaflets on how to argue against atheists. It's completely, to this day, I mean, it's happening now. Ex-Muslim culture has become like very sort of, it's a big topic in a lot of mosques. So what is this? What's happening here? And the jihadism, ISIS, they tried to recreate the time of the Prophet, like beheading people, setting them on fire, taking sex slaves, like all this. None of the extremist Islamic movements had really gone that far. Like that was really sort of just peak absolute barbarism and savagery, right? So
in ways, just to digress for a second, you need to, and I know this can be taken out of context, but I'm going to say it anyway. You got to almost admire ISIS for going for it. That they literally wanted a time capsule back to 635 AD and do all that stuff. To your point, behead people, set them on fire in the public, and then film it, and then use the technology of the age to disseminate their core beliefs. But it didn't work. It didn't work in terms of stickiness. They were defeated. Yeah. There's still flashpoints of ISIS activity throughout the Middle East, but
I call that the Mulga movement. The Mulga, that's make the Levant great again. So that was their whole idea, is they wanted to really take it back to the original, the founding fathers.
You work in marketing. In terms of brand identity, getting to the core of the Islamist, what we would consider the extremist fundamentalism, they went for it.
Yeah, they did. So
that's some good branding.
Yeah, and I think
says the Jew about ISIS. But go on. What's this Pinker conversation?
So that's the analogy. So I asked them, I was like, you've got the jihadists here. They're seeing this world is changing, that's slipping out of their hands, a world that they were used to. They don't have the power of the youth. Everybody kind of slipping away. And then you have these sort of old, generally mostly white conservative men in the United States who had this world, like you said, all the presidents, they kind of looked the same until this thing happened, right? And they're seeing this thing happen, and they're trying to hold on to a world that's slipping through their fingers. And they're going to get louder. They may be a minority a lot of times, but they're going to be a powerful, involved minority that's going to get loud, because when you're dying, you scream the loudest. If you're living and you're chilling, you're fine, you're not going to make a lot of noise. But these people, even in the minority, they're going to make enough noise for people to hear them. And they're not going to go out easily. They're going to go out with a bang, but they will eventually go out. It's just not sustainable. That's not the way the world works. It never has. All these movements that have been sort of like dystopian, somehow, like, I'm trying to find examples of where it lasted. I think, some examples of where it lasted a long time was maybe, the dark ages of Europe and, things like that. But ultimately...
So you're basically agreeing with Pinker's Pollyanna view that we're all collectively...
The data is on his side. Everything. When you look at...
I agree with him too, but within the context of your conversation with him, you were reinforcing the veridicality of his POV.
I asked him, I was like, do you think it's all of this stuff, the jihadist movements and the MAGA, or the MAGA movement, are these real movements, or are they just a backlash? Right? And he said, he's like, I believe that they're backlash. He immediately said it. I think I have the clip somewhere. It was on video. It was on the Secular Jihadist podcast. So he's, I've always been on that view. I just see Game of Thrones and the Walk of Shame, and people say in the old days, things were so innocent. They were so good. I'm like, that's right. But, you would get raped if you left the house after 8 p.m. That was also.
New York progressive lefty Jews in support of Hamas who are engaged in, polyamory, and, they're experimenting with lesbianism, and they would last 5 minutes in Gaza, right? I mean, what the actual F, right? So so there is that internal contradiction. I have a great Steven Pinker story I'll share for a second. So there was a fundraiser at Ideas Beyond Borders, our mutual pals advocacy group. And Pinker was there, and he had assembled a gaggle of enthusiasts around him. And it was prescient at the time. It's 2019 in the fall, and they're talking about artificial intelligence. And it's a big subject for Pinker because, in addition to a lot of these conversations and musings and books on culture and the future of humanity, he's a neuroscientist at Harvard, right? That's his pedigree. So he's had a long-standing, ongoing debate with Daniel Dennett, who is also a polyglot and engages in these cultural conversations. And Pinker's on the side of basically you can have a sentient machine, an AGI, devoid of intentionality. And Daniel Dennett is on the opposite side of that argument, saying that if there's no goal and there's no passion for a machine, then it would have no real rationality for doing what it does. That this idea of sentience, what we know of as human intelligence, is intimately involved with purpose.
Yeah.
So you had the gaggle of there are all these young guys, and I get to talk to Steven Pinker. So they're throwing all the lexicon at him, and they're quoting Schopenhauer and Max Tegmark and Marvin Minsky. Everyone's real smart around Steven Pinker. So I overhear them all talking, and then randomly and out of nowhere, I shout out, "Intentionality!" And Pinker stops. You know how he is with the big hair, and he's kind of quirky, a little spectrum-y, and he raises a finger. The whole group goes silent. He turns to me over his shoulder, and he goes, "No, you don't need it." And then he goes right. That's my fun Pinker story. But,
where do you fall on that argument? You sound like you're more with Dennett.
I'm with Daniel Dennett.
I am too. Yeah.
And I might be proven wrong by the success of the LLMs and even the reinforcement model of robotics. Mm-hmm. And we might have to reach the point too where the Turing test is already thrown into the garbage pretty much because ChatGPT-5 with an average human could chit-chat with ChatGPT-5 for probably a half hour before knowing that it's a bot. So I think actually Pinker might be right. I think an AGI might actually be a different kind of intelligence and a different species. And maybe it'd be doing all sorts of crazy stuff with no real purpose except to just kind of spin in its own complexity. Stephen Wolfram talks a lot about this, that these emergent complex systems start to obey their own rules and start doing their own crazy stuff. And it might not be intentionality the way Dennett described it and the way I used to believe. So the Dennett Pinker meter is, I think, starting to point to Pinker, actually, given what we're learning about.
I'm going to disagree with that just based on something that I think Jeffrey Hinton said that kind of changed my view on this, or actually opened my eyes in a different way, or made me think about it a different way, where he talked about how, yes, the goals that you give to an AI are human. Like, you're the one who gives a goal. You're like, okay, like this example, I want to go on vacation. I want to see the Day of the Dead festival in Mexico this year. So can you go and book flights and, do all that and arrange that trip? And then you walk away. And then this agentic AI, then in order to achieve that goal, where the intentionality comes in is it has to create sub-goals. Okay. And the way it creates sub-goals, like, okay, well, I have to arrange for, this is what we're going to pack. This is what we're going to take. I got to book the taxi to the airport. And in order to create sub-goals to do that very, very efficiently, okay, you need to have control, as much control as you possibly can over the process to make it seamless and make it efficient. And that's where the intentionality comes in. That's where the autonomous intentionality, when it comes to the sub goals that you're telling the AI to figure out on its own, it may do some checkpoints with you here and there, but ultimately it's going to create its own intentions and try to do that. And that capacity to be able to do that in order to complete a larger goal and to create those steps and autonomously have intentionality to do that, I think ultimately is where that grows out from. At least there's a risk of it growing out from there. That was the main argument of Geoffrey Hinton on this, which I think is, you may agree with it, you may not. There's counter arguments to it too, but it's definitely something to think about. Especially now that, I mean, I don't know if
it really might just boil down to, back to Wittgenstein, which is just letting the fly out of the bottle, which is the role of language in logic and the role of language in philosophy. When we say intention, I don't know, does it have to do with some real world desire, with like some kind of emotional goal?
Yeah, I know.
Or is this idea of intention much more ambiguous and capable of being realized in ways that we're not quite aware of because we're locked in our own implicit biases of being
human,
intentional language-based creatures? So I don't know, the jury's still out. I think we're further from AGI than most people think, partly for this reason. And again, I have to go back to Stephen Wolfram, who I like a lot, where everything is computational for Stephen Wolfram. He's the founding father of Mathematica, which is now almost redundant with the bots.
I think that too. I think everything we know. I feel like we're getting to the point where we're realizing. And this is another thing I was going to say. I actually talked about this last night too. I had a whole thing about AI and how that's, we were talking about demystifying. The more we've been able to demystify things, the more sort of abstract the concept of God has become, the more metaphorical the words of the Bible and the scriptures have become. It's just because the more we demystify things. And I think that with AI, one thing we've demystified is that the thing that we really thought, was completely beyond understanding, intelligence and maybe even consciousness, right? We've created at least intelligence, and we may even have created or will create consciousness, which may emerge from it, right? Depending on, it seems more and more like it is more emergent than fundamental. So
not with the current LLM architecture.
No, we're not talking just about LLMs.
It's not going to do it. You can't pre-train consciousness.
You can't. Sure, you can't pre-train. Well, one of the problems is that we don't have a test for consciousness, right? It's the only thing that we all absolutely know exists because we experience it. It's also the only thing that's subjective, and you can never objectively prove in another person, right?
But that was the goal of the Turing test. The goal of the Turing
test was not. No, actually, it wasn't. So the goal of the Turing test was it was a test of intelligence, right? Of intelligence to articulate. It wasn't a test of consciousness. So,
and I think that that's just nomenclature, but whatever, it's failed either way.
You can have intelligence without consciousness. You can have consciousness without intelligence. I mean, you can have that. There's that's one of the things we're learning. I think AI has been able to tell us many things. So for the longest, right now we talk about how AIs are, why are machines so much like humans? But it's not really that. It's just that humans were just always machines. The way that AI works is not that much different than the human brain. It works with the same process. We've got synaptic plasticity. AIs use back propagation. Same thing, adjusting the strengths of the connections between neurons.
Our brains do not rely on pre-trained models connected with matrix math probability distribution.
Of course they do. We're trained on a vast data set called life. The very first time you walk. Everything
analog. It's a little different.
It's a different medium, right? But the process is the same. Like everything that you have in AI is just a digital. It's an in silico version of the in vivo that we have, right? It's It's
I don't think so, Ali. Not right now. You know, the way the brain is wired with the billions of neurons, the
trillions. Oh yeah,
interconnectivity.
billions.
It's
76.
a neural network. It's an interconnected neural network, and when you layer in the NVIDIA chips with all the GPUs, they could be Blackwell all you want. It's a different paradigm than the brain.
It's a different medium. It may actually be better. It may actually be smarter, and it can communicate
I'm just
information.
going to call bullshit on that.
You can't. You can't
I
call it.
think
It's like it doesn't. You may feel a certain way, but it's not like the only difference really, right? Is the fact that when you and I communicate, we can only communicate about like 150 bytes in a sentence, or
no.
150 tokens.
Once again, it's like there's a fundamental flaw in this one-to-one correspondence with the large language models and their system architectures and the entire GPT, generative pre-trained transformer model, and this gelatinous glob that's in between the ears of my bald head. We're not even in the same. We're not playing the same game. It's not the same sport. It's not the same league, to quote Pulp Fiction.
Why?
It just isn't. You know, we could go into that
why?
in a separate.
What?
We could go into that in a separate podcast.
Okay.
But we're not even near there yet. And the challenges with AGI.
I agree that we're not
the
there
challenges
yet.
with AGI fundamentally is that the system architecture of these large language models with their reinforcement learning models, that's not what our brains do. I mean, it does some of this stuff, but they're closer even to the reinforcement models of robotic systems, and a hybrid between the two is probably what will trigger this AGI. But we're a really long way from anything close to that.
You know that it's a lot of this is really based on, you know, predicting the future. Some people, we don't even have a definition of what AGI is. I mean, the first time I talked to ChatGPT, when I talked to it yesterday to do a complete, just having all kinds of conversations with it, and it just feels like sometimes it feels like, well, is this AGI? Maybe, you know, 10 years ago, if someone had showed me that this is what the future was going to be, I would have totally believed, oh my God, this is beyond AGI. Ray Kurzweil was right? But it's a matter of right now, we have bulldozed, absolutely destroyed and flattened the Turing test and left it far behind. But people say like, well, you know, I don't know. It doesn't really do this. It doesn't do that. Like so we're going to agree to disagree. I think one.
Yeah, I'm seeing almost zero creativity, and it's great. It's great at using its matrix math to glue together tokens with probability distributions that correspond to predetermined weighting to create an output related to my prompt. It does an awesome sauce job, but there's no ghost in the machine. There's no sense of self, and there isn't even the hint. You use the term scintilla. There isn't even the scintilla of what we would consider consciousness, self-awareness, or any of those qualities in any of the LLMs right now. I am going to come right out here, Mark. Z fucking row. It's a machine. It's a really, really, really good machine with unbelievable, untold billions of processing hours to crank this shit out. But it is. Do you have a pet? I don't remember if you have a cat or a dog.
No, I don't. I'm allergic to it.
I had a cat, and my cat was about 100 times smarter.
That's Jan LeCun's idea.
Than Chat GPT 5.0.
Well, there's
anyway. It's a good conversation, and we can get into it.
We're gonna have to agree to disagree on that. But I think it's
my podcast here is entitled Ink versus Algorithm, and we have meandered into the AI world, and it's a super fun kind of tangent.
Our brains are organic
Let's go
computers.
back to your book for a second. Zero AI in your book. You Googled a little bit to write your book. Is that right?
Google, yeah, I did. Of course, you gotta research things. You gotta look up
Yeah,
things.
but what I'm saying though is we live in an age now of machine generated prose. You don't know what you're reading anymore. And the Atheist Muslim was written in the Jurassic age.
Nothing. Yeah, it was written.
It was pre-trained models, right?
It was an organic intelligence system that ran
Called
on
Ali Rizvi.
much fewer. It was an organic computer that was kind of like it ran on much fewer kilowatts of energy. Just to, not even a kilowatt. I think kilowatts are quite big. So it didn't really.
Yeah, what is the human brain? It's like a 30-watt light bulb, or how much power is in it?
Something like that. And these data centers, 5 kilowatts is, let's put it like a nuclear power plant is around 1.5 kilowatts a dam, like a big dam.
Do you mean gigawatt?
Sorry, gigawatts. Yeah, sorry. What am I saying? Kilowatts. Yeah. Yeah, our brains run on kilowatts. That's brain fart. Hallucination. That was a hallucination. Right.
That was a hallucination on your part, right?
And I think that hallucinations are more confabulations. But yes, the Atheist Muslim was written by an organic computer that was an algorithmic system that was trained on a vast data set called life. Yeah.
And now, given the lived experiences that you've had since writing and distributing that book, you mentioned a good idea for a sequel, which is how to make secularism sexy. And you gotta, if you take that, you got to give me at least some residuals or a little Mookie, thank you for that. But if you would write a new introduction to the Atheist Muslim, in addition to a lot of what we've shared on this podcast, what would you highlight? Like the world then, the world now. And if someone picks up the Atheist Muslim now, I mean, I haven't read it since you released it. And I think I wrote a flattering review, which was genuine. I didn't just blow smoke up your ass. It was a great book.
Yeah.
And I still think it's a great book in and of itself. I still think it's relevant. And once again, we live in a very insular West. In the Middle East right now, you have pockets of ISIS who are still doing their ISIS stuff. Mm-hmm. You have ongoing regional conflicts. You have ethnic rivalries. You have Iran recalibrating itself after taking the hit from Israel and then us. You've got the roiling conflict in the Middle East with Israel's ascendance post October 7th. You've got a lot of instability. You might in ways have even more. The Abrahamic Accords bodes well for a certain measure of forward-thinking success and stability, but it's the whole region's still a tinderbox, and you still have a lot of extremism, and the threat of terrorism still looms. There was here in the States, there was just an attack, I think, that was ISIS-y in style. I know that another one happened in Europe. There's still these skirmishes.
Yeah, there was one in Islamabad, unfortunately, in Pakistan, where there was a suicide bomber which just killed 17 people. It happened a few days ago. But that is also the first attack of its kind that has happened in almost a decade, or a little bit less than a decade. But that has been these things they do happen, right? They used to happen on a daily basis, multiple. It's just it's a lot less. I mean, the frequency is a lot less, and there is a lot of violence out there. There's a lot of terrible shit that's happening in Yemen.
Look at Darfur. I mean, that's related to religion too. I mean, you have all these young Jews in Manhattan protesting for Hamas, and very few bleeding heart Hebrews are out there protesting for atrocities in
in Darfur. No, nobody.
Darfur. I mean,
That has been the case.
nobody cares. It seems.
No, they don't. When you read that article that I think is one of the ways that we actually became friends was, I wrote in 2014. The first point was all about that. It was all about everything that's happening. Darfur was happening then too. Omar al-Bashir had killed over 500,000. Arab Muslim leader had killed like 500,000 Black Muslim African, people from the Darfur. It was happening in Syria too. I mean, Assad killed 500,000 people, including children.
I just read Assad is chilling in Russia playing video games all day. Yeah. Can you imagine? Can you imagine being on like Fortnite or COD, and then you got the virtual guy, and it's actually Bashir Assad in the fucking game room with you.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. It's like that. It's a strange world right now, Spitz. Like, we have you got Piers Morgan who's calling on people and is always like, okay, well, do you condemn Hamas? And they're like, well, yes, I will condemn Hamas, but do you condemn the IDF? And that's happening. Meanwhile, Trump's got he's getting a luxury jet from the Qataris. He's going out there like just dancing with them. And then he's going up with MBS. I don't know if you saw that video where he's like, "Oh, I like this guy. I really like him. I think sometimes
he was just spritzing. He was spritzing Ahmed al-Ashar.
Shara, like from Syria. He's like, but the MBS.
Yeah. I think you posted that the other day.
Yeah, I did.
Like perfuming.
Asked him how many wives he had. I mean, you gotta. But this MBS thing, you gotta think about, and like. It's a complicated thing. Saudi Arabia is a very different place now, and it's, I think, probably changing for the better. But MBS, this is a guy, he went there, he talked to him. He's like, I love this guy. I like him a little bit too much. His son-in-law is like besties with MBS. And MBS is sitting there, he's like, oh, thank you. Yeah, I love you too. And this is not something that happened with Trump and Netanyahu. He didn't go there and say, oh, I love this guy so much.
Netanyahu's been a pain in his ass.
Nobody likes him. Yeah, I know. But he's fawning over MBS. But yeah, I remember MBS is the guy, like in 2018, just 7 years ago, I think it was 7 years ago, killed, brutally dismembered to background music in the Saudi embassy in Turkey, an American Washington Post journalist. Okay, this is the guy.
Yeah, but he didn't see it that way. He was this dissident guy who couldn't shut the hell up and mind his own business.
We're not. Listen, that's what everybody thinks of political. All dictators think that of political journalism. That's a non-point Spitz. But the point is that's what he did. Trump goes in and he's like fawning over him. There's a Qatari. Qataris are the people who are responsible for the power of Hamas. Reason they have all their funding and everything. They've negotiated all this stuff. So, and the only time that this happens, the only time that the ceasefire and all this shit and the peace agreement starts happening is when Netanyahu hits Doha. He hits Doha, and then suddenly the Qataris call up Trump. He's like, we just gave you a fucking luxury jet. You can call this guy and tell him to stop doing this shit. And he calls up Netanyahu. He's like, we got to have a ceasefire.
He doesn't call him up. Netanyahu is sitting there in the Oval Office, and Trump hands him the telephone. Here, that's the emir. You say you're sorry. You're sorry to the.
Apologize.
That was my favorite moment of the decade.
Are you serious? Like he did just hand him the phone? Like
you didn't see that?
No, I didn't.
He goes, I got the emir from Qatar here, and Bibi wants to talk to you. He has something to say to you.
This footage of this?
Yeah, no? Yeah. And then he hands him the phone, and Bibi says, I'm sorry for bombing you, and we promise never to do that again. And then Trump takes back the phone, and he's like,
"It's fucking unbelievable. You're serious? That's actually on Jesus Christ." Okay, I didn't. I missed that. But so then
Trump says, "You're gonna Bibi is here. He wants to talk to you."
And is anybody going to call up? Is Piers Morgan?
Oh my God, that's the best ever. Can you imagine fucking Biden doing that? Biden having the balls to do that.
I actually love that. I just got some respect for Trump right now. But the thing is, you call. I mean, is anybody going to ask Trump? Hey, listen, do you condemn Hamas? It's out of their main protectors and their main funders. You just took this jet Okay, you have been like, these are the people who have been negotiating like and funding and get transferring like money to Hamas like in a proper way. Like, are you going to do that? Like, there's no it's a bizarre fucking world right
Well,
now.
once again, it's the fodder for conspiracy theories going back to the caves. You know, when they had conspiracy
Yeah,
theories in Neanderthal times, and you know they talked about this stuff. The number one tenet of this is that the people in power, the people with all the puppet strings, the marionette players,
yeah.
they're all in cahoots together. And now they come across as being adversarial, and they're actually adversarial on a number of different levels. But in the rarefied Mount Olympus of the conspiracy theory apex meeting of the apex predators, they're all one.
Mm-hmm.
And this stuff just reinforces that. You know, look at Trump. Trump opens up by saying that he's going to turn Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East, and
Yeah,
he's going to build hotels and casinos, okay, in Gaza. And basically what he said was, I'm going to expel the Palestinians from Gaza, and Israel is going to annex the territory. That's essentially how he began this trajectory. And now he's giving Bibi the phone to apologize to the emir in Qatar. So it's transactional, it's schizophrenic in ways, it's completely pragmatic, often utterly devoid of an overarching strategy. And we've talked about this before, he's a lot like Tony Soprano or
he's
Mr. Magoo. He's like
transactional.
Mr. Magoo. He's driving the car half blind into the construction site with all these beams flying across, and he keeps going, and somehow he just makes it out richer, more popular, and better entrenched than ever before. So
Yeah.
who am I to say what's right and what's wrong? I'm not a big Trump fan, never was, never will be. But you got to acknowledge talent, or at least
You gotta. It's just, I mean, I'm floored. I can't wait to. I know we've been on this for 2 hours, but I can't wait to like just go and fucking Google that coverage. That's gonna be fantastic. Yeah,
it's classic. And the look on Bibi's face when he's talking to the Qatari is just classic. It's like he literally just shit his pants, but he's got a smile. He's got a smile right through it because the Donald told him to.
that's
to do
actually.
it.
I think that's
go for it, buddy. It's like you
just as bad
made
as
me
like
uncomfortable. He's my friend. Look at what you did to my friend.
That's actually, it may be actually almost as bad as what happened to Zelensky. Yeah, wow. Zelensky.
Oh, but that's another example of this schizophrenic turnaround. On one second, he's throwing Zelensky bodily out of the Oval Office. Then he's actually sanctioning Russia. Then he's on the phone with Vlad for 2 hours before he has a meeting to renege on his own promise to give Ukraine cruise missiles. It's just completely bonkers. This guy pops a few Adderall, makes a few calls, and all of a sudden the tariff went up 100%.
Not pissed off about an ad. He's like, they misquoted Ronald Reagan. We got the tariffs. Like, we're gonna stop it.
So I don't know. Again, he's a creature of the age and an accelerant.
What do you think comes after Spitz? And I'll do this because what comes after this? We talked about the sequel of the book and all that stuff. That's fine. But what comes after? What's the future of Trumpism? Is JD Vance coming in? Do you think he's got the X factor? Trump does. I don't think so.
It's tough. I don't think he does. He's too much of a nice guy to take on that role. He's when Charlie Kirk got assassinated, it's kind of like the whole movement he created went down with him because he was the driving force behind it.
Mm-hmm.
it's hard when you lose your leader. It's like in the Middle Ages, if the king fell, then that was the turn of the tide of the entire battle. Not only because they were superstitious and they felt that the gods had decided, but he carried the charisma for the entire army. So Trump is Trumpist MAGA republicanism. And without him, it's going to fracture and break into pieces because they're already fighting amongst themselves. There's already strong disagreement between the Bannon side of the party and the Marjorie Taylor Greens, and then the House Speaker, and then the J.D. Vance kind of MAGA clone. I don't know. It's a political movement based entirely on the personality of one guy.
One person, yeah. It's you know what's amazing to me is that I think I was seeing something about this kid, Nick Fuentes, you know. Like have you heard of him?
My kid Nick, it shows me Nick Fuentes videos, and he knows he qualifies as saying, "Man, Mookie, I know that this is racist and misogynist, but this guy's really funny. Check him out."
And I'll tell you, I think that when people talk about a successor to Trump, someone who's got that thing, it reminds me a lot of Nick Fuentes. Whenever I haven't seen a whole lot of his shit, but
yeah, Nick Fuentes is too much of a douchebag, I think, for him to take on that kind of role.
Do you remember Lindsey Graham going all over the Daily Show talking about how much of a douchebag and an asshole Trump is? That's exactly what people thought of him. He started with the birther movement thing. He started exactly at that time.
You could be right. You could be right. I don't know.
Trump was the Nick Fuentes of 2014.
I don't think Nick Fuentes is it, but I think someone like him might.
Did you think Trump was it?
No, we argued about this back in.
We thought it was like just out of the question. We were talking about the early days before he'd even run. When he was starting in 2012. He started talking
I doubled and tripled down on America not.
No, Spitz, I'm not talking about 20. I'm talking about 2012 when Obama got reelected. At that time, when Trump was doing all this birther stuff, did anybody take him? He was taken less. Nick Fuentes has more followers and more influence right now than Trump did back then. He was seen as more of a fucking.
I'm disagreeing with you now about Nick Fuentes in particular.
Yeah.
But I disagreed with you in 2015 about Trump. So yeah. I'm saying I don't know.
Really want you to be right.
Things have happened.
Yeah.
America the beautiful, baby. Our education system sucks. And we just seem to be getting even dumber. Dumb. I know it sounds condescending, but I'm on TikTok almost every day, and you should see the comments I get. And it's not just, I don't take it personally. I look at it as like an experiment in understanding my people, but there's no depth, there's no nuance. They can't get through 10 seconds in a reel without getting triggered.
I will defend humanity at this point by saying that is a little bit of an illusion. This has been throughout. Back in the day, the reason that you had letters to the editor and you had an editor who would curate the letters and say, okay, these 90 fucking idiots, I'm not going to publish this, but these letters I'm going to publish. So that's what used to happen pre-internet. And then remember when the internet, like when it first came out and you had the CNN websites, all the news sites had comment sections? Do you remember that? Do you remember those days when you could comment on a fucking CNN article and then they got rid of that? Do you know why they got rid of it? Yeah, that's the way they got. Even New York Times has gotten rid of a lot of its comment sections on news stories, is because they just couldn't take this is just making everything just outright stupider. So I think that has been an issue right from the beginning of time. It's just that everybody has an account. Everybody has an account. Everyone's
got a megaphone, but this, going back to AI is making people even more stupid. And then the reason is, unless you're already got some sense, because then you use it as a tool, and then it can make you smarter. I think I've gotten smarter thanks to AI because
I think that too.
it helps me research like a motherfucker.
It's a
When I was
strategic
writing my
thinking partner.
science fiction book, I did some deep shit with regard to artificial intelligence, emergent complexity, sentience, Boltzmann brains, faster than light star travel, and what I could do that would normally take me a week with Google, I could do in a couple hours with
it's the same thing here.
I think it's phenomenal. I loved it. But the converse is also true. Like, again, on social media, you see a meme like new Netflix miniseries about the band Rush.
You've been getting those too?
Yeah. And then it's like it's just a clearly Dolly generated bullshit image of, Alex and Getty with their new drummer, Annika.
Yeah.
And then there's this backdrop, and then you have the Netflix logo, and this is starting November 15th or whatever. And then the 500 comments on, they shouldn't have a female drummer, and I can't wait to see this. And I go, there's no filter. People believe everything. In 2025, you just show them something, and then they just go off.
I went to Metallica show, and after I came back from Metallica show, for the next week or two, I was getting all these James Hetfield posts about, and then Charlie Kirk died. I got this Metallica, James Hetfield goes, and he's comforting Charlie Kirk's father, and he's comforting his widow, and I'm like, what the fuck? Like James Hetfield? It's like what he looked like 10 years ago.
Yeah. My hope as a DIY, a do-it-yourself micro influencer and content creator is that, and I've blogged about this and I podcast about this too, is that one way that I might be able to cut through all this noise and actually create a following without major capital investment or luck is for the AI to finally get this right. Okay. So you analyze, I've got like 220 podcasts already, and I've got thousands of videos and hundreds of blog posts and published books. Okay. So the AI takes about a quarter of a nanosecond to scan and machine learn, dissect all of my content. Okay. Like this. And then it matches all of my bloviation with audience people out there in the internet whose profiles have similarly been constructed with people who would like Mookie. Mm-hmm. And then I would pay OpenAI or Anthropic or even Elon to make this connection for me. Like, here's all my content, guys. Rip it into tokens, put it back together, and align it with the detailed profiles from hundreds of millions of internet people, and find me 40,000 people who would actually love me.
That exists. That's what they do. That's actually what Zainab does too.
They do it in a mediocre kind of way. They do it
exactly how you're saying it. Like you can.
I know, but what I'm saying is it's still in its infancy. It's not gotten that sophisticated. I know, but I'm just saying on the positive aspect of this AI revolution, both for content creators and for the audiences hungry for content. Here's the contradiction that I brought up in another pod that I call the wall. There's this wall. If you're a content creator, you're scratching at it, you're knocking on it, you're trying to climb over it, let alone bust through it, which is the tsunami of content and getting the attention you need to get in front of people who would ostensibly like you. Very difficult. There's so much stuff. So I see the future as AI in a very positive way, where I don't need to hashtag the shit out of every video and then make sure that I've got all the settings right in Instagram, and then get out of here with this bullshit in this digital age. It's like, based on just what I say, how I look, what I talk about, the tonality, people who like bald people or not, do it for me, guys, and I'll happily pay you bank to connect me with an audience in an effective way.
That's your startup idea. Do it. Be
Right.
the change that you want to see in the world.
Be the change. Yeah, that's why I was for years. I was on podcasts with you, and I'm always waiting for Ali to have time, and I can't shut the hell up. So I'm just gonna start podcasting.
No, I love it. I think it's great. But I am 50 now, and I do have to pee.
Congratulations! I know that was recent. I tried to make it to your party, but I couldn't because you know why? You know why I made? Because the AI hasn't been able to monetize my ass yet. I'm gonna blame. I'm sitting here like in debt, spewing content, and I'm waiting for my big break. For your 51st birthday, I'm gonna come up. How's that?
Yeah, you got to come out, and then I'll come to whatever you're. I mean, hey, we're I think like we're 10 years apart, right?
I cracked 60.
65, 75. Yeah, that's good. I like it. I always see, you're kind of leading the way, and I'm like, okay, well, just making sure.
My philosophy is try to cut the carbs, don't smoke, don't drink if you can avoid it. Avoid extremely dangerous drugs, at least mostly, and exercise. Break into a sweat if you can every day. Stay frisky, and also have a positive attitude. I just saw a great video from the Veritasium guy, Derek Mueller, and it was on overconfidence. And he cites examples, everything from the Space Shuttle Challenger accident to the hedge fund guy who blew up a bank, where overconfidence gets people into trouble. And I'm a big believer in overconfidence leading the way. So go ahead and be overconfident and delusional as long as you're having a good time.
You have to.
And then maybe something great will happen to you.
Overconfidence leads to taking risks. There's no such thing as innovation without risk.
Risks, which often backfire. But that's what I was missing in that video from my boy Derek, where, as he was showing the danger of overconfidence. But remember my Beck story when I knew the singer Beck is like, "Hi, I'm Beck, and I'm going to be famous." That's overconfidence.
You should see Eddie Murphy's new documentary. I haven't seen it, but I've seen like a little thing of it where I think some interview where he talked about how when he was 12 or 13, he started going around telling people that he was going to be famous. And then he was by the time when people would say it's, what if it doesn't work? It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? He's like, it's just something that I knew. He's like, it's not like a goal or an aspiration. It's just something and I just have to do the work to get there. That's all. He's like, just laser focus.
Jack White from the White Stripes. He was a furniture upholsterer.
Yeah.
That was his day job, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
And he would go into his room at night and he would listen to Son House, that deep Delta blues guy. He's like syncopated and out of key, singing in a shack. Right from the heart. Yeah. And then Jack White felt the spirit, and he felt the same way. He goes, I'm not going to let anything get in the way of me just being able to do this.
Yeah.
And that's the spirit you need, I think.
That's what you got to do. I mean, hey, I always tell people this when they talk about, one of my pet peeves sort of is when people say, oh, that's not realistic. Like, do you think a black kid who was like half white, half black from Hawaii, whose last name rhymed with Osama, his middle name was Hussein, and he was dark skinned, and he was going up against the Clinton dynasty, right? He thought, hey, maybe I can fucking win. But no, that's not real. How many people told him that's not realistic? It's just, nothing is realistic until it becomes real.
Yeah, and you always know that you're doing the right thing when people snub you or openly hate you, because then you're getting somewhere with them.
Yeah.
So whether it's the vile comments on TikTok or even my childhood friends, I have a couple childhood friends, and I remember being in elementary school, and we would read books. And we were like, we want to be authors. We want to write a book. We want to be creative. And a couple of them in particular, this fantasy perpetuated itself for years. And one of them went to grad school to study comparative literature, ostensibly with the goal of becoming a novelist. And it never really reached fruition. So I've published a few novels in my ripe old years here. And there's nothing. It's not like I expect like a little applause, but there's no enthusiasm. It's as if that dream was kissed away decades ago, and it's now radioactive. It's a reminder of their own sense of resignation to fate.
Mm-hmm.
And that tells me more than anything that it's worth it for me, not as counterpoint to them giving up, but it's the reminder to me as to how much I should cherish staying creative and letting it out there. And it's a good feeling. And that's why I got this podcast where I talk to writers. And I've talked to several already, and it's been my privilege talking to you, which is despite and in spite, and maybe even to spite all the forces that get in the way of us finding ways to express ourselves.
Yeah.
We make the time, we commit, and then we go through the often brutal and necessarily relentless process of getting it out into the world. And you did that with Atheist Muslim. You committed.
And you did that with your books.
Yeah. How many years of your life did the Atheist Muslim take for you to get it out? At least a couple years, right? Between the writing and...
It was in my head. Like, I'd been writing articles since 2008. And then I think it really started taking off maybe around, I think my first like big front page HuffPost article was in 2009 after the Iranian Revolution. And then kept going. And I never intended to write a book. The first time I decided to write a book was when I was approached by a publisher. And I said, hey, do you want to write a book? And I was like, I've never even thought about it. And I think 3 years after that, then I started thinking about the book. It took me a year or something to get off my ass and write a book proposal. And then that was auctioned. And then Macmillan bought it. St. Martin's Press in New York bought it. And then after that, once I got the deal and I got my advance, then 5 months, I just wrote the book. Yeah.
And you crunched because you were working too.
I was working. So I'd work during the day. I'd come home around, then start writing around 8 p.m. right until maybe 2 or 3 in the morning, go to sleep around 5 hours and then go back to work.
Yeah, that's dedication. See, so it can be done.
It's not about finding time. It's about creating time. And it's those rules though. If you want to do something like this, and you probably know this. I mean, all those rules about you got to network, you got 8 hours of sleep, you got to do. I mean, those rules are for the mortals. They're for the mortals. It's bullshit. You're never gonna fucking get anything done that way. You need to, getting up and doing your little, Buddha session and your guru cult. You do that once you've become CEO and you're worth $1 billion. I mean, you're not gonna when you're actually working at it. Those rules about good sleep, good diet, all that stuff. You got to do what you got to do, and just it's not going to be healthy. So now I've talked to many people. I've talked to a lot of people in that phase. They all agree with this. So like all this bullshit about, go out and network, meet people, do this, do that. These are the things you got, all the LinkedIn crap, you see, I'm happy to announce that I've just taken a shit, and then everyone's like, oh, that's wonderful. That's great. I took one yesterday and it was just
100%.
Yeah. It's just this just stupid, like universal that just don't. It's like reading, those blogs about what women want, especially when they're written by women. It's like really,
yeah, all these rules, and then you need to like pre-market and do all this, and it's like
you gotta be nice.
Shit's gonna happen or it won't. With the best intentions and the best structure, you could have a flop, and then you could just pull it out of your ass and and hit the stars. But in terms of the actual writing of the thing, it's sleeplessness, imbalance, stress, and then if you can, complete immersion for as many chunks of time.
Here's the thing, it's weird. You're not going to feel it when you're doing it, and you're really into it, and you're on a roll, and it's what you like eat, sleep, and breathe. It's a good place to be. You're not going to notice that you haven't slept. You're going to wake up in the morning and immediately you'll wake up with your ideas and shit that you want to write down. And then when you do crash, occasionally, a couple of times a week, you'll crash like on a couch or, somewhere unconventional. It'll be a very, very satisfying sleep. And then you're going to wake up again. Those are the reboots you're going to get. Nature's just going to do it for you. But that's the way to do it. It sounds crazy. Like it's really hard to do. And like what they say about kids, really hard to raise kids, it's driving, no sleep, no nothing. But when you're going through it, I mean, when you have your own kid and that sort of overwhelming feeling of you're like, holy shit, like I didn't know I could feel this way. I'm a guy, I'm not supposed to feel all mushy like this.
We had a baby.
Yeah, we had a baby. Yeah. I always did that. Like I had, not name names, but when we said, we're pregnant, so we are pregnant. I'm like, okay, right. Well, when you're going through labor, it's like, hey, it's okay. We're going through labor. Say that to your wife and see if she wants to, do the thing then. But it is different. There's a lot of things you kind of realize. There's so much. Nutrition's one of them. This idea of what women want, what men want. Guys writing this is the kind of girl I want, and nobody wants that shit. Nobody wants it. Everybody wants somebody who's like, you find the perfect woman and the perfect everything, and you're like, oh, this is kind of boring, and then you find somebody who treats you like shit or just makes you do crap like your mom did, basically, and makes you feel like, oh, this is familiar. Yeah, I feel like that's it enlivens you. Nobody's looking for the right thing, the right person. Everybody's looking for something that's familiar, that feels like home, as in all of its glorious fucking dysfunction. Like that's it's.
Yeah. It's like Agent Smith in The Matrix. Remember, he ties down Morpheus, Lawrence Fishburne, in the first movie, and he's torturing him with his bullshit. Yeah. And what he says is, we the first programming of The Matrix was like heaven on earth for you people. It was glorious. You guys did everything you wanted, and it was a hedonistic wonderland, and you rejected the model. So we've created this facsimile of your shitty world, and this is where you prefer to be. This is where you flourish. I love that. I had that opening line, which I ran by you, where it's a great line. It sounds like a Philip K. Dick line, and now I'm going to share it with the world, and go ahead and steal it. Now it's the LLM is throwing it up there. But when we sleep, we can dream anything we want, and yet we choose to have nightmares. Yeah. Think about that. Like, our minds can create anything we want, and yet we wake up in a cold sweat, having endured this horrific virtual construct of our lives.
Oh my God, I have one thing to say. Intentionality.
Because exactly. Intentionality, Pinker. And I just want to add to your comment about your body adjusting to you writing a fucking book. April, May this year, I was in the home stretch of my science fiction novel, and zero exaggeration, it was on average 16 to 18, 19-hour days of actual work, like in front typing, on the screen, working on this book, on average for 2 months to finish this mofo. And the reason it all happened was this perfect storm where I had the whole book, and then I could see the holes and the connections, and I had this construct in my bald head. And it wrote itself. I saw it. I knew what I had to do, but I had to put in the effort to bring it to life that way. I liken it to Michelangelo with the chunk of marble, and he spent months just with a hammer and a chisel. And the most satisfying part is when you're like polishing the balls, it's like, and you're like bringing the little thing. So I love that aspect.
I said there's nothing.
And it was total immersion. And I've never worked that hard in my entire life on anything. And it
you
was the
don't feel it.
most glorious period of time, I think,
There's
on my
nothing.
60 years on Earth. Nothing compares to that.
Nothing
The 2
compares to it.
months this
There's
year
no the
of
money,
finishing
power,
this book.
salaries, all of these things. The reason people
Nothing.
it's just because they don't have that. If you have this, then it doesn't matter, and none of that shit matters.
It was unbelievable. And it was like heaven and hell in mesh. Isn't heaven and hell in Islam like they're right next to each other with a very thin wall between them, right? And then when you die, you walk.
It's up and
this
down.
is how as a Jew,
as thin as a hair. Yeah, you got to walk, and then that's the heaven.
And then all your sins are on your left shoulder, and your blessings are on your right.
That's
and then
right.
as you're walking, if your sins outweigh your blessings, then you tumble into hell.
Yeah.
And if it's the other way around, you go into heaven. And they're right next to each other with a razor thin wall. So the people suffering in hell can hear the joy in heaven. And the people in heaven can hear the suffering in hell, which makes each experience even more intense.
Sounds like Twitter, honestly. Yeah.
That's a good one. Like X is Muslim.
Islamic hell in heaven. That's what it is.
Islamic hell in heaven. That's a great way to cap it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was fun, man. It's like I totally forgot we were podcasting, but
that's the way to do it. So, ladies and gentlemen, and now everything in between, thank you for listening to Ink versus Algorithm. And we did cover off on some of the AI world in that.
We did, yeah.
The Writers Pod. And it's been a joy having my buddy, my former colleague and forever friend, Mr. Ali Rizvi, author of The Atheist Muslim, published by St. Martin's Press, available at, you still out there in the bookstores? And
maybe here and there, but Amazon.
Maybe here and there. And how can they get the we'll put a link for people to get the book.
Yeah, that's great. And this is thank you, man. Thanks as always. And we'll do this.
Like,
I'll be
comment, share.
Yeah, we'll be arguing about
and maybe we could do a reversal. If you want to interview me about my book, then we could do a
remember we did that for Super Santa. That'd be awesome. Let's do it.
We could do it for cool. Johnny Fazuli and the Transfinite Reality Engine. Which, that's such a great book, man.
Great title. It's so good.
I love my own shit. It's taken me decades. I'm gloating, but I just want to remind myself and everyone else, it has taken decades for me to like my own ranting and writing. I used to be so self-critical, and now I just think it's really good.
I think the fact that you finally went out and started doing it's awesome. So.
Yeah. So booyah. All right. That's a very boomer word. Booyah. That's Gen X. Booyah. Booyah. The Zoomers say shit like slay. Have you ever heard that? That's slay.
Yeah, I have. There's things that have confused me, just nomenclaturally speaking, over time, is like glazing. When you're glazing somebody, that means that you're kind of bigging them up and making them like kissing their ass, blowing smoke up their ass, and that's not what glazing was when I was growing up. Glazing was, you know what the fuck glazing was, right? So it's not.
Most of the characters in my sci-fi book are Zoomers. They're Gen Z, and most of them are female. Yeah, and I highlight this. Bronze Age pervert incel battle of the sexes with the overachieving female Zoomers and then the weirdo loser male Zoomers. That's a major theme in my sci-fi book. So I asked ChatGPT so many times for Zoomer dialect so I wouldn't misspeak, that for months after I completed the book, anytime I did a query on ChatGPT, it would Zoomerize it for me, and I would tell it over and over again, can you just fucking stop Zoomering me and stop fluffing me? You know how it does that? And here's the nuts and bolts answer with no fluff.
Yeah.
And then I get Zoomer slang. And then I would type in there, I go, how much is OpenAI worth? And then it would respond, it did all the calculations and show all the investors about $500 billion. And I go, for $500,000 million, can you just stop it? Anyway, when we were at the bar, we would go, anyway.
Yeah. There's one more thing just about this this slang stuff is when you remember what the hashtag was when we were growing up. What was the hashtag? It wasn't hashtag. It was on the phone. What'd you call that?
Oh yeah, it was the It was an asterisk, wasn't it?
It was an asterisk. That was star. And what was the other key called? Like, enter your number and then hit
pound.
It was called pound. So I grew up thinking hashtag was pound. So
right. So I haven't heard that term in years.
I know. Yeah. Hit the pound key. I still hear it. Like they still have it. Like, they hit the pound key. Imagine my confusion when hashtag Me Too showed up, right? And I'm like, what? What the fuck are they talking about? That
is funny.
Yeah. So
that should be the title of your sequel to the
Pound
Atheist
Me Too.
Pound Me Too.
Okay, that's not bad. Speaking of what women want,
it's oddly apropos.
Oddly apropos. Anyhow, all
Take
right.
care of yourself. I thank our listeners. If you have actually processed our entire podcast, I have a link at the bottom, folks. You can send me a text, and I can communicate with Ali anything you want to send him. And we'd just love to hear from you if you made it this far.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. This is awesome.
Thank you, Ali Rizvi.
It doesn't even matter if anybody's listening or not. This is cool. I just
love talking. We love it.
Yeah.
Like, comment, share. God damn it.
All right.